Tonight's work session for January 24th, 2024 is called to order. The agenda for this session is posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tabs. This meeting is being streamlined on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. The purpose for tonight's meeting is to interview 3 firms for the purpose of conducting a search for our next superintendent. This began last month when we put out an informal RFP for the superintendent search firm. After receiving responses to the IRFP, 3 board members and district staff worked together with procurement team to evaluate and review the scoring matrix before individually scoring each proposal. After the final scores were tabulated, we extended invitations to the following 3 search firms: Red Associates, Human Capital Enterprises, and Alma Advisory Group for interviews this evening. So before we begin with our first interview, I kind of want to review the format for the interviews. We will begin with introductions for our board introduction, our staff introductions, or everybody at PPS staff who's here. Then we'll invite the firm. And this is where it kind of go get kind of tricky. So originally I had them, the firm will provide information on their business, including their superintendent search experience, introduction, and introduce the team that will be the actual ones collaborating with us for our search. Now, this is where we're going to get kind of tricky because the search firm, I'm asked to present a PowerPoint presentation covering questions 1 through 9. And so when they get on, I ask if they're going to, during their presentation, is those questions going to be answered? If not, then we will just ask each board member will ask their question and get their answers. The reason why I wanted it for it to be a PowerPoint presentation is in case people forgot something, we can get the PowerPoint in. Board members can go over them later to do their scoring if need be. We're only going to be asking follow-up questions for questions 1 through 9. The other, the other 10 through 15 questions is just for informational purposes for us. And then if time permits, we'll welcome them to ask questions of us, of the board, the board. If we have time. If we are less than 10 minutes, we're less than around 10 minutes before we done follow-up questions, we'll just have them just go directly to closing remarks, and then we'll move on to the next firm. Any questions before we get started? All right. Well, let's bring in the first Red Associates.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You can go ahead and start. Is this your whole team here already?
I do see Steve. I'm just waiting to make sure his camera is coming on.
There we go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
All right. So the kind of layout will be, and help me understand, you guys' presentation, your PowerPoint presentations, did you guys answer the questions in those, or were you guys expecting us to ask questions?
We expect to be asked questions. Our presentation is focused on our structure.
Great. Okay, so what we do is we're going to give an introduction for board members. Then you guys can go ahead and give your introduction about who you guys are, go into your presentation, and then right after the presentation, we'll go into the questions. We ask that each question be around 3 minutes each to answer. Depending on what time we have left, we'll offer you guys options to ask us questions. And then right around 10 minutes till, and we'll have either Kara or Roseanne let you know where you're at time-wise. And then after around 10 minutes, we'll ask you for your closing remarks, and then we'll go on from there.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Awesome. So I'll start. My name is Gary Hollins. I am the board chair of Portland Public Schools, and then I will throw it to Eddie.
Yep. My name's Eddie Wong, board member, just a board member. Yeah, was also a former teacher. Do I have to throw it to someone? I'll throw it to Patty.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Patty Sullivan, board member just for the last 6 months, and I was a former teacher as well.
Who are you passing it to?
I'll pass to Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. Michelle DePass, a board member and proud graduate of Portland Public Schools.
Who are you throwing it to?
I'm throwing it to Julia.
Looks like she's having some technical difficulties. So I introduced her for that. I'm Julia Brim Edwards. Julia Brim Edwards. She's the board member as well, and was also on the selection committee for the superintendent selection committee as well. And then I'm gonna throw it to Mr. Andrew Scott.
Hello, Andrew Scott. I'm also a PPS board member from Zone 1, and nice to meet you, Steve, and nice to see you, Libra.
Hey, Gary, can
Yeah.
I go back? Sorry about that technical problem. So Julia Bernard, board member, PPS parent for 18 years and a PPS grad. Good to see you, Libra. Nice to meet you, Steve.
Good to meet you.
We have Ms. Liz Large here as well.
Hi, good evening. I'm Liz Large. I'm the district's contracted general counsel. Welcome.
And
has Frankie gone yet?
yes, that's what I was calling on, Miss Frankie.
Hi, I'm Frankie. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the student rep.
Awesome. Miss Bradshaw, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, Kara Bradshaw. I'm the executive assistant in the board office.
Hi, Kara.
All right. I think Director Green is trying to get on, so he'll just come on hopefully as you guys are going through your presentation. And we will turn it to you guys.
Excellent. Great to see all of you guys. I am Libra Ford. I am a education advocate and been that for over 25 years. I founded a school in Hawaii, the first hybrid school, in 2008, and been advocating in Oregon ever since I've arrived here. And I also was on the North Clackamas School Board, where I know many of you, and currently I sit on the state education board, and I'll pass it to Steve.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Steve Chestnut, and as Libra said, we're both very excited to be here to have this conversation with you about the possibility of assisting you in finding your next superintendent. And our entire team cannot join us tonight, but we'll introduce them in a moment. But we're all very passionate about assisting boards to find great superintendents that are an excellent match for the district. I was superintendent for 21 years in the state of Washington. After leaving Washington, I was superintendent for 6 years in Arizona. And I retired from full-time work 4 years ago as an executive director from the Scottsdale Unified School District. And I've been working with Ray & Associates for the last 4 years, and that's really the way that I can give back to the profession I love. And so it's fun for me to do this, and greatly appreciate the service that board members provide. So we have a little PowerPoint here that we will go through, and I'll continue to introduce members of the team who cannot be here. Mr. David Faltes is our managing director, and he retired as a superintendent from Carroll, Texas. In 2020, he was a superintendent for a total of 18 years. And Mr. Ryan Sandberg, he's co-chief executive officer of the Center for Effective School Operations. And that's a sister organization that we work with. They bring a lot of human resources experience, and he's a member of our team as well.
Thank you, Steve. So we're going to begin our presentation, and I first just want to ground us in saying congratulations. As you know, I have been in this position, or maybe you don't know, I have been in this position with Ray and Associates as a board member, and now I'm on the other side with Ray and Associates and excited to assist with board members in this very important process. PPS, in its juxtaposition between joy and vibrant environment building and disruption of inequities, is paramount to the state of Oregon. We recognize that there's a history here at PPS that's not just from the past and the current and speaking to the future, but also a history that has really led the education path of the state. And we're excited about what's next for you guys. So who are we? We are a longstanding firm, the only firm that is women-owned. We have 40% BIPOC and women associates from all over the state. In particular, I think it's important to name that you got one right here that has worked closely with you guys in the past. We also have cutting-edge tools that help you reach into our pool, which we have the largest candidacy pool out of all the firms that you can select and try to choose what's best for your future. In addition to that, we recognize that this is important, not just for today, but for our future. We're looking at this from a partnership in your social justice disruption, and we're super excited about what's yet to come for PPS. I'll pass it to Steve. Steve,
Yeah,
there you go.
In all of our searches, we're very committed to candidate care and candidate outreach, and we work very hard at that. Libra hinted that we have an expansive database of over 2,000 school administrators. So once a vacancy is posted, that goes out immediately to them. We also get an average of 28,000 unique monthly visitors to our Ray & Associates website. And superintendent, central office people that are considering a superintendent position, they know to check that website. When I was a superintendent, I was in the market interested in making a move, I would immediately check the Ray & Associates website. But we also know that 2/3 of our placements come from outside of the candidates we already have registered. So we know that people are watching the advertisements that we send out. They're responding to the recruitment that we do. So next slide, please. So I would like to describe to you our process, our search process. Our process has 5 stages. You can find another description of that process on page 4 of the proposal. But stage 1 is board input, and that's where we start. The board determines the timeline of the search. The board has the responsibility for finalizing the profile of an ideal candidate, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. The board obviously conducts interviews. We assist with that, but that's obviously a major responsibility. And then, of course, the board has to determine candidate compensation. That's an important thing to determine so you can attract candidates. And we determine, we help you assist that. You determine, we assist. But it's your search. We take that very seriously, that it's your search and not ours. Stage 2 is what we call district profile development. So that is when we come up with a profile of the ideal candidate, the candidate that matches Portland the best based on the data that we have. And we gather that data in a variety of ways. One way is through a 31 qualities assessment, which is an online survey. It's based on the professional standards for educational leaders, which is the Bible of school leadership, educational leadership nationwide. And The results from that survey are compiled over a period of about 2 to 3 weeks, and then we compile that information and share it with the board as you help to decide what that profile of the ideal candidate looks like. We also hold in-person or virtual stakeholder meetings. We can do both, either or. And in a district your size, we're used to doing 15, 18, 20 different stakeholder groups. You decide which stakeholder groups you want us to reach out to, and we work with you to make that happen. Now, we know that Portland Public Schools is a community-centric district, and we will honor that tradition, and we will work hard to reach into the various communities that you identify, the groups that you would like us to work with, to gather feedback from them on what that ideal candidate looks like. We'll also do individual board member interviews. That's where we start the process. And then that candidate profile is unique to your district. It won't look like any of the others because there's just a lot of data to analyze to come up with that final profile. And then we utilize that profile throughout the entirety of the search in the recruitment efforts, screening, candidate evaluation, final selection. It also is a signal to candidates to know if they are a good match for what you are looking for. And so that profile is featured prominently in all of our advertising materials, and candidates can take a look at that. Stage 3 is recruitment, and we aggressively recruit top candidates. We advertise on many fronts, including social media, and we utilize our nationwide network of associates. We do a lot of outreach to people that would be good fit for Portland Public Schools based on the profile that you develop. Stage 4 is the candidate pool. So what we've done, we've done all that work to gather those applications. We end up with a candidate pool, and then our team screens those candidates based on the profile. We also do background investigations, internet checks, social media checks to make sure that we're identifying any issues that are out there. And most current superintendents and district office administrators have probably been involved in some controversies. That's normal. But we will look for all those and make sure we're aware of what all of those are. And if there are problems, then we will identify those, and that'll be part of our screening process. And then for selected finalists in the final round, we engage a professional organization to conduct a complete criminal, civil litigation, social security, sex offender, motor vehicle record check, and verification of educational degrees at no additional fee. And what we do then for the first round of interviews, we bring 8 to 10 top candidates and all that extensive application information to the board. The board also has access to all applications. So if we bring the top 10 or 12 to you for consideration in that first round of interviews, and you say, hey, what about this person? Let's look at this application. If you have a couple that you would like to bring forward, then that's going to be up to you. You're in the driver's seat. This is the board search. But our goal is to have no surprises as we bring you that candidate pool. That brings us then to stage 5, which is board selection of candidates. See if you can go back one. There we go. So we assist you along the way in that selection process. You will review those top candidate applications, those 10 or 12, as you prepare for that first round of interviews. We also do one-way video interviews, which I'll talk about more in just a moment. But that's another important piece of information for you to get a good look at the candidates. Then when we are considering how many candidates to bring forward for that first round of interviews out of that 10 or 12, we have a consensus building scoring instrument that we use, which will help facilitate the discussion. But it's your discussion, it's your deliberation to decide on candidate advancement for both the semifinal and the final interviews. And then along the way, we will also finalize with you interview questions for each round of the interviews. Okay, next slide. The Spark Hire video I just mentioned, that is another thing that we provide for those 10 or 12 top candidates. And I'm not going to play that for you, but this is actually one of our associates, Dr. Karen Hall, one of our associates in St. Louis. And anyway, you will see a question. You'll get this as a video link. There will be about 3 or 4 questions, and you'll get an opportunity in each each answer is timed, usually about 90 seconds. So you'll have the opportunity to see how these candidates perform in an impromptu manner. It is a time situation, so they cannot prepare for this. Once they open that link, they have like 5 minutes to get it done. And so you can see how superintendent candidates can speak in an impromptu manner, which is an important part of the job, and it gives you a little insight into their personality and the way they approach public speaking. Next slide. Why choose the Ray way? Ray and Associates. Why choose us? Well, we have good references. A couple of them are listed here. The top one is from Millard Public Schools in Omaha, Nebraska, district of 24,000. Bottom one is from Broward County Schools in Florida, 260,000. We do districts small and large, and we're proud of the work we do in across the nation. Next slide is similar, more recommendations and references. The top one is from Alhambra Elementary School District in Phoenix, Arizona. 12,000 students in that district. I was one of the team members on that search, and we chose Dr. Cecilia Reyes, and she's wonderful. And we took a lot of pride in that. The bottom one is from Bexar City Schools in Ohio, so we are proud of those references, and that's it's important for you to know that we do a lot of varied searches, and we do them successfully. And most recently, some of the recent large searches we've done have included Wichita Public Schools, Anchorage School District. I was on that particular team, St. Louis Public Schools, Fairbanks North Star. So a lot of larger districts, urban districts. And so that's something we're proud of as well. Okay, next slide. I have to start to wind up the presentation, not end it, but head towards the finish line here with a summary. We have unique size and scope. We believe in engagement with the community, very important part of our process. We work hard at outreach to outstanding candidates. We provide in-depth candidate information. We rely on the board's leadership throughout the process, and we provide selection assistance so that you get that candidate signed as your new superintendent. So, Libra, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Steve. To wrap this up, I think it's important that we acknowledge that this is a moment for the community, but it's also a moment that will be recognized beyond all of our existence. The work of this district now and in the future makes an impact on people that we don't even know yet. And it must be student-centered. We must continue your disruption with the joy. The juxtaposition of that is important. And we are honored to be here and talk to you about how we can walk that path with you, with, of course, you leading that process so that we continue to build something that we're proud of for today, tomorrow, and beyond. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and we can prepare for your questions.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. So everybody knows what question they have. So we'll just start with Andrew with question number 1.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Let me bring it up here. And, you touched on some of this a little bit in your presentation, but could you talk just a little bit about how familiar you are with our school district, its culture, our challenges, and our overall goals?
Yeah, I particularly want to answer this question because in full transparency, I've been working with PPS for several years since I've come to Portland. I feel very comfortable with the culture, but I think it's important that all that are listening know that we recognize that this is over 44,000 students that will be impacted, 81 schools, and there's several community-based organizations involved, families and communities, and the disruption of racial inequities must include all those individuals and groups. And this district is really profoundly known for that work, and that is the culture. That is a big, rich part of the history. In addition to that, I think it's important that we recognize some of the challenges have been the state infrastructure that has actually displaced individuals and created things like gentrification and white flight that have damaged damage the way the work can and cannot be done. And so those things are important to recognize as this search goes on, and people choose to be a part of this district. They must know the history of the harm and how we must move forward to correct some of those things. There's also a continuous weight that PPS carries in terms of being the largest school district in the state and creating pathways for education for the state. And even though that is a heavy weight to carry, it's also an opportunity to change the way that the state sees education for all students, and making sure that all students are represented at all times. The historical bonds, levies, and laws that this district has helped pass are profound, and we must recognize those things. The historical relationships with businesses and communities and the leading of community-based organization also has changed education rates, graduation rates, and so many other things to move this state forward in education. And of course, there's 32,000 graduates that have come through PPS, including some of your board members, their parents, and their parents. There are education advocates that not only currently exist in the district, but have been a part of this district for generations. And those individuals should be recognized and understood in the contributions in building this district up. And last but not least, I think it's important to understand that large districts will always have challenges and adversity, but the grit and the passion of this board has been something that has really led the state towards solutions. And so anyone that you guys choose to be a part of this and to lead this with you should know all of those things, but also know that they're a part of a culture that is rich and profound for the state of Oregon.
Thank you.
All right. Next we have Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. And you also covered on question 2, which is how will you go about learning what the key strengths of our next leader are? But it's really how will you go about learning what the key strengths of our next leader should be? Can you share the methods that you'd use to interview senior staff and education experts to identify candidate profiles who match the district's academic and operational needs? And I know that you'd mentioned that you do, you have a survey that you send out. Are there additional methods you use to get at that information to build a candidate profile?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. I think I did touch on that quite a bit, but maybe to amplify a little bit more, we believe that our application process will identify the key strengths of applicants. That's really one of the main goals of the entire process. So as we aggressively recruit top diverse candidates, we know that the strengths identified in the district profile, we're trying to match with those people that we're talking to. The application submitted will contain a cover letter, letters of reference, and we do a phone interview with top applicants with questions specifically about the district, which will help to identify their strengths. We try to get to know them at the beginning of the process, so we have a personal relationship with them so that we can answer the questions that they have, so that we can learn more about them and get specifics about their strengths. We do a phone reference check with all references. We also contact people who are not on the candidate's reference list to identify their strengths. We research online, as I mentioned, of the top candidates, which also helps to identify strengths and possible weaknesses, problems, or controversies. Each of the top candidates will complete that one-way impromptu video interview that we talked about, and that's available to the board. Obviously, that's another way to determine some strengths. We assist the board in developing those interview questions, which will allow you to ask about specific areas, strengths, that kind of thing. And public forums also have a place. It's up to the district if you're going to include public forums as part of the final interview process. That's another wonderful way to engage finalists with the community, and you can observe their strengths in real time in that setting as well. So the result of that process, I believe, is quite a few data points that will help you determine the strengths of each candidate.
Thank you. And I know we're limited on time, but I have the question is about how you would work with the senior staff and education experts here to learn about, to help build that candidate profile, to learn about the key strengths that our district needs, rather than candidate side. How will you work with the district side and the senior leaders hear operations people to learn what the skills are that are needed in this moment.
Sure. The stakeholders, I was just going to say the stakeholder meetings that we conduct, internal staff is a very important part of that. Union leadership, teachers, classified staff, parent groups. But yes, senior staff is a very important part of that process. We gather that information from them as well.
Yeah, and if I can add, I think as a person that experienced this as a board member, a good analogy that you could think through is the data point collection is a heavy lift, right? And so there's a lot of data points that need to be collected, which you will have access to all of them, right? And so that you can make good decisions, informed decisions. But it's also all coming from all of the different areas. So the expectation of understanding who, what, when, and how of a candidate is where we take that heavy lift from you, but then we give you the results of that, so then you can see all of those data points, and there's nothing that won't be shown to you, but that heavy lift is done by us. And I think too, Director DePass, is the next question, if I could go ahead and go into that, because that's really what you were asking, is really the internal candidates that are something that you want to bubble up. We ask you those things. We ask of the board, we ask of administration, and we also ask of the community, like, who do you see as a potential leader? Now, we do expect those individuals to go through the process, because due diligence is important in this entire time, but we do make sure that we acknowledge that some leaders exist already, right? And we want to make sure that they're seen and heard, and we take that information and move through. And we do that through the 15 to 20 community and stakeholder meetings, and also through one-on-one meetings with the board and one-on-one meetings with the admin staff. And it makes a real difference in not just getting that like online search folks, but the folks that you know, that you see every day, who you know could be that next leader.
Thank you.
All right, so that actually goes into question number 3. Go ahead, Patty.
Which was just answered very well, thank you. And also, but along with that, we've gotten some email, or at least I have one email from someone who suggested someone they knew. They could even be in your database, who knows, but that's just someone we've been passed on to you, I take it. And
Yeah, absolutely. We would take that information, but we also are very intentional about making sure we're asking for that information from community and giving them a clear way of giving that to us, because sometimes people don't even know that they have input, right? And it's important that people know that they have input, and we're clear about that. So yes, we would take that information, but I also want to zone in that due diligence is important. So every recommendation still would have to go through the process, because we have a best practice process that we know will make sure we don't miss anything in the way.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add on to a little bit to that. I want to add on to that. What actually strategies do you employ that will look at local or internal candidates as well?
Yeah, so we conduct 15 to 20 community meetings, and that is up to the board. So you guys lead how many you want to do, and with who, and what questions you want to be seen in those meetings. Those meetings can be online or in person or both. And they're recorded, so people have access to that, and that becomes a data point for the board to review, so you can see what those are. In addition to that, we meet with each board member. We meet with designated admin and senior staff to also identify those individuals. And last but not least, the community. It's very important that community has access. And so those are 3 kind of ways that we gather that. But the stakeholder community meetings is key, because you all know that if community feels like their voice is being heard, that is the way that you move the needle. So those are going to be really important, and a number of those and who will be led by you.
Okay, thanks. Director Green, I don't know if you was here earlier, but you get to ask question number 4.
I'll ask it, since I didn't even get to ask 3. You'd already done it. Okay, so 4 is, how do you go about ensuring a diverse and inclusive pool of candidates who must match our candidate profile?
Sure, I'll answer that. In addition to aggressively recruiting top diverse candidates, we also advertise widely. And the board makes the final decision on advertising, but the publications of organizations that we recommend include the American Association of School Administrators, that's the National Superintendents Association, of course, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, the National Association of Black School Educators, National Association of School Superintendents, et cetera. So we try to advertise widely to get the word out. In addition, we recommend that the board lean into the community outreach process to help make an informed decision. So we kind of just talked about that in the last question as well. At every one of those 15 to 20 community stakeholder meetings, we have a question. Do you have candidates that you would like to recommend? Give us the name, give us the contact information, and we follow up on every one of those. And we say something like, your name surfaced in our process. Here is how you apply for the job. We would encourage you to look at the profile. If you feel you're a good match for this position, then you should apply. So that's a very important part of what we do.
Thank you.
And I also want to add or remind you guys that we have that tool with the interview questions. So you're getting to see candidates that are in your entire pool at all times. In addition to that, I personally am making a commitment to make sure that this is a diverse pool for you to select from. I have done this before with Ray and Associates, and I don't want you guys to see anything less than everyone and everybody, because that is exactly what students deserve.
Thank you. Question 5 is, could you please provide information on the criteria and method utilized for evaluating superintendent candidates, and what steps can be taken to guarantee a thorough evaluation?
Well, we've certainly touched on this, but just to reemphasize, in stage 4 of our process, as you know, we bring you the top 10 or 12 candidates that match the ideal profile, and we bring them to you for your consideration, but you are really the final quality check on that process. You have access to all the applications, as I mentioned. If the board agrees that one or more of the candidates not in that 10 or 12 should be brought and move forward in the process, that's fine. It's your search, but that's the basic process that we use.
Should I go to the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the presentation and sharing sort of your backgrounds and how you approach things. I'm going to focus in on that part of the recruitment when you're at the process where you've got a final group of candidates or you're presenting the candidates, and like for you to talk about how you face challenges come up. Say, for example, that final pool of candidates, it's not as robust, or, frankly, you don't have a good selection of candidates who match our position description, candidates drop out. How do you work with the board, and how do you approach that as a firm?
Well, we know that unforeseen things do happen. We know that, so we can expect that. So, for example, if there's an inadequate pool of candidates, we will just be very transparent with you about that situation and bring you decisions to make concerning that. Are you going to extend the application deadline? Are you going to appoint an internal interim? Are you going to hire an outside interim superintendent? Those are the kinds of options you'd have in that kind of a situation. If, for example, one candidate dropped out in the first round of interviews, let's say you had 4 people lined up for that first round of interviews, one of them drops out, well, then you have options. We'll be very transparent about that. We'll communicate with the board. You'll have to make the decision on that. Do you interview one less candidate? Do you add a candidate? What do you do there? If there's 2 finalists and one drops out, you have similar decisions to make. In all those situations, those scenarios, we would just be very transparent with you, bring that information to you. We always emphasize excellent communication through the process so that there's no surprises and so that you're informed and can make a good decision, because it's not our search, it's yours. And we will work with you to tackle those unforeseen situations which are certain to come up. I've had it happen in other searches where finalists have dropped out, and you get on the phone and you'll figure out a solution.
Great, thank you.
I just want to add, Julia, if I could, that it's important to also know that we're aware of many other searches that are happening. So part of that transparency is not just like the candidate pool, if it's inadequate or not. It's also if that candidate possibly is in, a top ranking in another search. So you're well aware of that in the forefront of this, and there's no surprises from that angle because this is a world that we're in beyond Portland, right? And so a lot of these candidates do show up in other places. So that's part of the transparency. So you guys are well informed.
Perfect. Thank you both.
All right. Next, we have Director Wong.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like this question because it's sort of hinting or asking a little bit for specifics. So the question is, what are the 2 to 3 most important things for the board to do to ensure successful recruitment and hiring of a superintendent who matches our candidate profile and position description? I might, if I could add a little bit, maybe if you are so inclined, you could add maybe what not to do, because I always love examples of when people shoot themselves in the foot and learn from their mistakes. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I know that we talked a lot about these 15 to 20 stakeholder community meetings, but I want to talk from personal experience on what to do and what not to do, because I think that's a great additional question. And so it's important that you have them, right? But it's also important that you watch them, because a lot of times board members won't be able to attend. Read the data points. Make sure you go through and look at what the community is saying and what your stakeholders are saying, because it really will inform a successful recruitment and hiring process. And if you can find that time, something that I did that was very helpful was just I designated a time every week, an hour, just to review the data points. So I really was like keeping up with the pace and making sure that I understood what was being said and what information was being passed on. A second thing is that the board needs to know that the expectation is that once you guys identify a profile, that every candidate matches that profile. That if there's anything that you want to change, that we change that in the expectations for all, not just a few. And so again, what not to do is to have like many different profiles for a one job search. We need to stick to what the profile is, understand what that is, and making sure it's informed by all, but not letting that vary just because there might be some inadequacies in a search. And last but not least, I think it's important that you also are all on the same page and in the same book, right? And so any discussions that you need to have, if we need to help facilitate those and be honest and transparent with each other, I think that's important to do. What not to do is to not use your voice. Each one of you are a voting member. And so it is absolutely criminal to not speak up and say your part, because you represent an area, and it's very important that you use your voice.
All right, thank you. We have Frankie, question number 8.
How can technology and data be effectively utilized in the search process, specifically for candidate assessments and market analysis?
Yes, well, I talked about the 31 Qualities Assessment Survey. So that's an online survey, electronic based. And we make that available to all board members, all staff, all community members. And we keep that survey open for about 1 month. And that survey allows for open-ended comments as well. And we tabulate all the results and make that summary available in an email to board members as they develop the profile of the ideal candidates. So there's a ton of electronic communication, obviously, that is technology-based that we rely on. Zoom is another good example. As Libra mentioned, those 15 to 20 stakeholder meetings, you may choose you want all of them in Zoom format, or you may want half of them in person or all of them in person. But in any case, Zoom is a very important tool that we use as well. Those are probably the main examples.
And I think other tools that are important to mention are making sure that there's no language barriers in whatever approach we use for the community outreach, as well as accessibility barriers. We want to make sure that all of that we use any tool available to us to make sure that those things don't become a barrier for folks to be included.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Frankie, you want to do number 9?
Sure.
All right.
What makes your firm stand out from other superintendent search firms, and why should our district choose your services?
Well, we love this question. It's always good to have a student on the panel too. So appreciate Frankie being here. We have a track record of success. We have completed over 1,600 searches in the last 49 years. The tenure of the superintendents we place averages 6.5 years. It was a little higher before the COVID era, but 6.5 years currently. We have a price match guarantee. If the new superintendent departs for any reason in the first year, we will do another search for a $0 base fee. Travel, advertising, and material expenses only. If in the second year a majority of the board is still in place and the departure is due to dissatisfaction, we will do another search just as I just described. But just to reiterate, that price match guarantee, we will match any other firm with comparable services. Most importantly, as former school district leaders, educational leaders, we are passionate about assisting school boards finding a new superintendent who is well matched to the district and set up for great success. And the last thing I'd say is we take a lot of pride in having outstanding communication throughout the process. And we recommend weekly phone call or Zoom between Libra, myself, and a representative from the board so that there are absolutely no surprises throughout the process. And sometimes that has to be 2 or 3 calls during the week. But we try to keep it manageable. We try to keep the load off of the board. We work with your key staff members. We try not to overburden them as well. And we just try to make sure we have a well-communicated process that moves along on our timeline that we've agreed to a successful conclusion.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So the next part is we got about 15 minutes left. So we're going to do about 5 minutes of questions. Some follow-up questions if anyone have. If you can raise your hand if you have some follow-up questions, and we do about 5 minutes of that, and then the last, say, 10 minutes, you guys can give your closing statements. All right, we have Director Burnett-Worth, then we have Director Long.
Yeah, I think this is an easy one. I'm just wondering, 2 parts to this question. Can you share your most recent superintendent recruitments in the Pacific Northwest? And then maybe just a career highlight of the superintendent recruitment and placement that you're most proud of.
Sure. 2 years ago, I led the search for Educational Service District 123 in Pasco, Washington. Very unique search because it's an educational service agency, serves about 70,000 students, about 25 school districts. And so that was a lot of fun to find the perfect match for that particular district. And the superintendent is still there and being very successful. Just this week, we learned that we'll be working with the North Thurston School District in Lacey, Washington, and doing their search. Their superintendent has just retired recently. So our firm is proud that we'll be able to do that search. I think the search that I'm most proud of was Fairbanks North Star. That's a very unique and diverse community, and that was the search last year. We ended up hiring the internal candidate after the entire process, and I know he's continuing to be very successful, so I'm very proud of that search. It was a very unique experience.
And for me personally, I'm going to be completely biased. The best search was North Clackamas School District, which Ray and Associates helped us do. And we were able to hire the first African-American woman superintendent for the state. And I'm excited. I'm not going to spoil anything, but the numbers that that superintendent is leading for North Clackamas are just amazing. And she continues to do great work, even though and that was also a process done during the pandemic. So we had a double whammy. And so super proud of that search. And I feel as a board member, that's what I'm excited to bring to you guys is the experience as a board member versus just the experience as a search firm.
All right, Director Wong.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about your like what processes you do for kind of a self-assessment, like in terms of follow-up or how do you know that the superintendent searches were successful or placements or were successful? What kind of process do you have internally to figure out like how do you improve next time, right?
Sure. The main indicator is the superintendent still on the job after a year or two, and we do check back on that, of course, and we track the tenure, length of tenure for each of our placements. That's very important. We also do follow-up care with board members to take. We provide surveys so that they can give us feedback on really the state of their district and their needs, so that there's a baseline of data based on the recent search. And then we do that 6 months later so that you can get some dialogue going with your new superintendent on how things are going. But then we also ask specifically for feedback, reference checks from the districts that we do the searches with, asking for, of course, ideally we want glowing recommendations, but we also want to know areas that could be improved.
And that also happens throughout the process. It's not just at the end. There's definitely milestones in the middle where you get to have that complete transparent feedback and adjustments will be made.
All right, we have Director Sullivan, and then Director Sullivan, and then Director DePass.
Yes, one thing that's really important in our district, and we have real trouble if it doesn't work right, is communication. And just how do you help us with the communication as we go through this process?
Sure, I'll take.
All the stakeholders.
I'll start with that one. Yeah, I mentioned that before. We recommend that there's a weekly telephone call or Zoom call between myself, Libra, and a representative of the board, and then we do a similar process with key staff members in your district. I'm not sure who you will appoint. Could be somebody in HR, somebody executive assistant, but we work with key people, communications office, or whomever you appoint for us to have good communication with, and we touch base with them weekly as well.
And then they can get it out to the regular, everybody else in the district.
Correct.
All the parents, yeah.
I also want to just also recognize that in this particular search, we have the opportunity of partnering with CISO, which is a large national communication firm that has dealt with very large districts in terms of communicating effectively and efficiently. And so that is one of the tools that we'll be bringing in to make sure that we're all doing a good job in that area.
Right.
Director DePass?
Yeah, I'm curious if you screen your candidate pool based on key performance indicators. For instance, one of the things that it's persistent, not just in this district, we know it's in other districts around the country, is closing the achievement gap between white students and students of color. Is there any look back at the performance indicators or performance metrics for people in your candidate pool? And then in addition to tenure, are there other things that you're looking for? In other words, how would you describe success beyond the person's in the role for a year?
Right. Well, the ability to improve student achievement and close achievement gaps is a huge area that we do look at. That's always the important part of a successful superintendent profile. So that's the kind of thing that we're very interested in. But obviously, experience in the superintendent position is important. Doesn't mean that you have to have been a superintendent to. You could very well come from an assistant superintendent position in another district, but that type of senior leadership, of course, is something that we're very much interested in and looking for.
I think in addition to, it's important to know that you're going to have a pool of questions that you get to access and decide what questions you want to have a candidate answer. And in that pool, even though they're suggested questions, it's important to know that you can design questions, right? And so if there's a specific way or a specific part of performance that you're looking for, you can design that question. And I'm not just speaking from a theoretical level. We did that in North Clackamas. We took 4 questions that made sense and then made it make sense for what we were looking for in terms of outcomes. And in particular, what I hear your question saying is when you guys are looking at disrupting inequalities, how is that showing up in the work that they've done? You can develop a question around that. And in terms of the follow-up that we're doing on your behalf, in those questions that we're asking, you're in charge of that also. So that could be the follow-up also to make sure that we are watching that metric over time and how you want to see that come about.
All right, look like Director Brim Edwards have another one.
Thank you. So it sounds like you've had a very long, successful tenure of recruiting candidates, which is great to have track record. That means you've got people in a lot of places. I am wondering, my recollection is that you have a do not recruit on people that you've recruited before. And I'm wondering whether you have that and whether that, since you have a long track record replacing superintendent, whether that limits the pool, do you feel, of candidates you have access to, or how does it impact your recruitment?
No, that's an important question. We do not recruit anyone until they've been on the job for 5 years. If they've been there for 5 years, then we will reach out to them if they're doing excellent work, but not for 5 years. Also, as I mentioned early on, 2/3 of our placements have come from outside of our database. So these are candidates that aren't necessarily registered with us. They are just choosing not to do that, and they are applying, though, for jobs that are interesting to them. And so I don't think there's any limitation on the pool in that process. And, on the other hand, it's there's a lot of vacancies right now, and that's a reality. And so I think that's the main factor that your search will be up against, is that there's a large number of searches going on nationwide right now.
Look like Student Director Silverstein, Frankie, have a question?
Yeah, so for performance indicators that are maybe a little harder to track as like data points, like, their involvement within the community and the general sense of like how the community feels about them, how do you go about looking at that?
Well, we make a point to talk to people that are not on their reference list and ask them and get feedback on their perception, and that goes a long way. Our research also gives us an indicator. The web has a lot of information, and if a superintendent has been in the news or a district administrator, assistant superintendent has been in the news, I mean, that is going to be available online, and we will research that. So we get a feel for the success of that leader in his or her previous position.
Yeah, and I think as a previous board member, another tool that's important is looking at past board meetings. And sometimes in board meetings, you can identify things that may have been a problem that won't necessarily bubble up to media, but also give you a really good indicator of what's going on. So that is something that I think, just from my lens as a board member, I would definitely want to offer to you guys as another way of looking at them outside of the typical data points.
Thank you.
All right. Look like we're coming up to our last 10 minutes. So we'll ask for you guys in closing remarks.
And hey, Gary, just really quick before the closing remarks, I just want to do a time check just so I understand. I thought we had an hour with each firm, and I know we started late with this one, but I just wanted to throw that out there so we make sure we're staying consistent through all of them tonight.
Yeah, so that's why we're going to 8:15 on this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve, you want to start and then I'll close out?
Sure. Yeah, I think, Mr. Hollins, I think you asked if we had any questions. I don't have any questions at this time. Once we're hired for this job, then of course we'll have a lot of questions, and we'll be asking you directly. Looking forward to that. But we're very excited about the possibility of working with you. Portland Public Schools is a premier district in the Northwest. As a educator in the state of Washington for 35 years, I'm very well aware of the reputation of Portland Public Schools. So we'd be proud and pleased to work with you, and we'd work very hard to make sure you get an outstanding superintendent.
Definitely did all of that. And I just want to, again, ground us in this moment. You've arrived here, and I appreciate the work that you have done to get to this point. I know you all are volunteers, and this is definitely a heavy lift. But I also want to recognize that this is a lift that's important for community, important for our future, important for what leadership could look like for all of us, so that we all can feel like we actually are excited and proud of what is going on in this district. And so with that being said, it is an honor to have presented to you guys tonight. I enjoy working with all of you guys in many capacities, but would be honored to join Ray and Associates in supporting you guys in this process.
Awesome. Thank you once again for you guys' time and effort that you guys have put into this. And you guys should be hearing from us shortly. Thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. So that's number one down. So the next one is supposed to start at 8:15.
Great. So we'll take a few minute break.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to say same.
You got 7 minutes.
Hello. Great to see you,
Human
Board.
Capital Enterprises.
Yes, thank you. I think my
All
team.
right. All right.
I see one more person who's named the Scholar First. Is that part of your group as well?
Yes, that
Okay,
is
I'll
Tammy
bring them
Campbell.
over now too.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So, well, thank you guys for coming, spending the time, with our IRFP and, being here at this hour. Just want to let you know that we just really appreciate you guys being here and presenting for us tonight. We'll kind of go over kind of the way it'll go. We'll just do some brief introductions of everybody who's online here on the PPS side. After that, you guys can go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you guys are and go into your presentation. After the presentation, we'll ask our questions. After the questions are asked, we'll ask follow-up questions. And we have time allotment afterwards. We will ask if you guys have questions for us. If we have time, we'll do that. If we don't, we'll just go into the conclusion of your guys' presentation here today. We usually try to give about 10 minutes before the hour. If we can get things done in between that, we'll just go right into your closing remarks. All right, so I'll start off with me. My name is Gary Hollins. I am board chair of Portland Public Schools. I'm Oregon resident, PPS grad, and I'll move it to Eddie, our Director Wong.
Either one works. Eddie Wong, board member, was also a former teacher in PPS. I'll pass it on to Patty.
I'm Patty Sullivan, board member, also a former teacher. And I'll pass it to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Board Director Michelle DePass, a PPS parent and a PPS grad. And I will pass it on to Andrew.
Hi, good evening. I'm Andrew Scott. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a board member and also a PPS parent, and I will pass it on to Julia.
Julia.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Andrew. Hello, everybody.
I'm Julia Brim Edwards. I've been on the Portland School Board for 10 years, and I am a PPS grad and had 3 kids and was a PPS parent for 18 years. And I'll pass it to, is Frankie still on?
Yes, hi. I'm Frankie Silverstein. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the student rep. I think Director Green.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Herman Green. I am the vice chair of the board. I am a PPS parent. Well, all my kids are grown, but they all went through PPS. I myself graduated out of Buffalo, New York, and I've been here for quite some time now, and I'm excited to be a part of this process with all of you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, who you gonna pass it to? You got Liz, you got Kara, you got Roseanne.
Okay, I will pass it to my legal, who always keeps me right and make sure that I don't go astray, Miss Liz Large.
Thank you, Director Green. Good evening. I'm Liz Large. I'm the district's contracted general counsel. Welcome.
And we'll pass it to Miss Bradshaw.
Yes, sorry.
Hi, Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant for the Board Office.
And you're gonna pass it to Miss Powell.
Hello, Roseanne Powell, Board Manager. We should also give a big thank you to Terry Proctor, who is behind the PPS logo.
All right, so that's just who we are. So now we'll just hand it over to you guys to, tell us about who you are, the team that's going to be working with us, go through your presentation, and after that, we'll ask our questions, follow-up questions, and then you're going to wrap up your closing remarks at the end. All right, we'll turn it over to you guys.
Great. Thank you, Portland Public Schools. Thank you, board. It is truly an honor to be with you tonight in this very important moment of transition in your organization. My name is Hank Harris. I lead Human Capital Enterprises, and I have some amazing partners with me tonight who I am truly honored to work alongside. I'm going to ask them to just say hi right now, and then when we get to the presentation, you're going to learn a little bit more about them as we move into the presentation. Tammy Campbell.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tammy Campbell, former superintendent in Federal Way Public Schools, the most diverse district in the state of Washington. Currently the CEO of the Scholar First, where I do mentoring and coaching of superintendents, strategic planning, and all things to do with improving districts.
Thank you, Tammy. So good having you here tonight. Steve?
Well, good evening, Chair Hollins, members of the board. My name is Steve Webb. In addition to serving as an executive search associate with Human Capital Enterprises, I also serve as a senior consultant and mentor with ASA, the National School Superintendents Association, providing executive coaching and strategic planning support to superintendents and districts across the country. I retired in 2021 from Vancouver Public Schools as a superintendent of schools after a 36-year career in public education, 15 as superintendent of schools. On a personal note, I'm the father of a blended, adopted, multiracial family with 3 teenagers and 1 young adult, a junior at the University of Portland in our Vancouver home. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about how we can serve you with this important, critically important transition in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Hector?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hector Garcia. I'm saying hello to you from the Windy City, where it's gray and cold, like you would expect it at this time. I have been an educator for over 30 years, starting off as teacher, principal, district administrator, and superintendent. That's what I have been doing for the last 12 years, and have vast experience in nationally recognized schools, as well as bilingual settings. I'm thrilled to be with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. Christy?
Good evening, Chair Holland, members of the board. It's great to see you tonight. Christy Perry, former and retired superintendent from Salem Kaiser Public Schools. I have 18 years as an Oregon superintendent, and I've recently retired. In my retirement, I'm doing some executive coaching and dipping my toe in the search world a little bit. And I think one of the things that I bring to our team is my work in Salem Kaiser. You know, we serve such a diverse community, the greatest number of ELs, so many kids in poverty, great diversity and assets, and language, 84 languages spoken in Salem Kaiser public schools, which most people don't think about in Salem, Oregon, and a real heart for both the student voice. So I'm thrilled that you have a student advisor to your board, but then the community voice in the decision-making of an important decision like this, but in school district decision-making. So we did lots of work around engagement in my time in Salem Kaiser. So it's great to be here tonight.
Thank you, team. And thank you, board. And I can't help but smile when my colleagues are introducing themselves, because I feel so lucky to have them alongside with me, and I care so deeply about each one of them. And when we start the presentation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and that's not to fill time. I think that as you're thinking about this decision, the folks who are going to do this work with you, alongside you, whether it's us or whether it's somebody else, are going to bring their human selves to you and work very hard, arm in arm with you over the next few months in a very, very important undertaking. And so I don't want to give short shrift to who we are and what we bring to the table, both in terms of what we bring technically, but also just who we are as human beings. And so I'd like to start the presentation. And I think, Christy, do you have sharing? Right, let's put that first slide up and just briefly, but then move to, let's put our cover sheet up, and then and that's us. And and I'm going to ask you, board, to do two things at once. I'm going to speak to you about my story briefly, and I'm going to just ask you to read the bullet points here. I'm not really going to speak to these bullet points in this slide and the next one. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up on the East Coast, and I knew I always wanted to be a Northwesterner, and I got really lucky and found a job in the metro area in the early 90s, and fell in love with Portland and didn't think I would ever leave. And I got a teaching gig. It wasn't in Portland Public Schools, but it was nearby, but I lived right there on Southeast Belmont Street. And I don't know if it's sort of the nerd in me or what it says about me, but I know you haven't heard this very much about the building that you inhabit, but I thought the building you inhabit was really cool. And I thought it was like the center of gravity for Portland. Some people think of the pink building. I think of your pink building. And I remember as a young guy in my 20s going to Portland Public Schools school board meetings, thinking that one day I would want to contribute to this organization. I remember Jack Beerwitz was a superintendent back in those days. I don't remember too many of the board members, but I remember Lou Frederick was sitting on the board. And that was my introduction. I mean, that was, you know, during the day I was a teacher in a neighboring district, but I thought one day I'm going to make some kind of contribution to PPS. I've been really fortunate that I've had actually a couple of opportunities to do that. So after a career where I taught, and I was a school administrator, and then I became an HR director down in Canby, all the time living in Portland. And I think I lived in all 5 of our quadrants, maybe just 4 of them, actually. 4 of the 5 quadrants I lived in. And I had jobs typically outside of PPS. I became an employee of PPS in 2009. Let's switch to that next slide, Christy, if we can. As the executive director of human resources, and I got to serve in that capacity for 2.5 years. That is, as you all know, not the easiest job in the world, but it was incredibly, I felt incredibly honored that I got to play that role. And that might have been enough to satiate me as my contributions to PPS, but I was given another opportunity, which is, and if you read my proposal, if you read our team's proposal, you might have seen this, and you might not have had the opportunity to. So I'll just tell you that the last time PPS engaged in a superintendent search, you might remember, it's not so long ago, 2017, there was an initial search that didn't go terribly well. At that point in time in my career, I was running human capital enterprises. And we were largely doing HR consulting, but also we were doing cabinet level support for school districts, cabinet level, not superintendent level searches. For superintendent level searches, I had an agreement with a national firm. You might remember HYA or Hazard Young Attia, where for superintendent searches, I would be one of their associates. For cabinet level searches, my human capital enterprises team would lead that work. When that first search in 2016, 2017 didn't materialize, didn't work out well, it was the spring of 2017, and one of your board members, board member Brim Edwards, I remember giving HYA a call and saying, we need somebody else. We need somebody who knows Portland. It's April. We need to have a superintendent by the time school starts. My proudest moment in my career was that I got to play that role, that small role in the history of Portland Public Schools, worked very closely with that board, worked very closely with Director Brim Edwards. And of course, when she says we're going to do it, we know we're going to do it. I had full confidence that we could make it happen, and maybe a little bit of nervousness that it wouldn't happen in time for the start of school, but I was all in. And the fact that that led to the hiring of Superintendent Guerrero, who has been there for a considerably longer time than most urban superintendents, is something that I feel personally very, very fortunate to have played that little role in the city that I love, in a school district that I love. And so I'm honored to be here again tonight and excited to talk to you about what we might be able to do. And we're 6 and 7 years older, and I mean by that I mean our firm is. We now do superintendents under searches under our own banner, and we'd thank you for this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about how we do our work and why I think we're successful at what we do. Christy, let's switch to the next page. I think it's the next. I think we're going to go one more page, Christy. Thank you. And this is our We Care page, and maybe it's already evident. I've spoken largely about myself. I haven't really spoken about our team, but our team, as you'll get to know them, are largely Northwesterners, deeply wedded to the success of Oregon students, also Washington State students, but we really have a heart here in Oregon. And so the success of this superintendent search is not just about, from the firm perspective, being done with it. It's about a long-term relationship that has already started many years ago and continues. We care really deeply about what happens in Oregon schools, and we're really invested in leadership, in school district leadership in the state of Oregon. And we are right there as partners with you for the long haul in terms of wanting to make sure that this is a very successful hire. Next slide. One of the things that I think we do well is we sell Portland. We fall in love with our districts. We sell our districts, and I don't like the commodity sort of concept of selling, but when you are recruiting, you are getting the word out and enticing people to consider this opportunity. You're looking at a blast. We've done searches for PPS over the years. This was for the CFO search. We were asked to engage with your CFO search when Norberto was hired. This is an example of the kind of, you're only seeing the top half, but this is the example of the kind of marketing material we put out there. We have a subscriber list of 40,000 who get our emails. Now, I know a lot of entities can boast about the number of people that get their emails. I'm going to boast about the people that actually open our emails. So we get about we did one last week for another superintendency in Oregon, and we got a 50% open rate. That's 20,000 people who elect. You and I, we all get spammed with emails all the time, and we're very selective, right, about which ones we open. 20,000 people opened that email last weekend about a superintendency. And I think one of the reasons, if I can say, is that when we put out words, people want to read them. These are words that are true, and they're really enticing. Portland, Oregon, the greenest, most eclectic, and perhaps most forward-thinking city in our country, is proud of the rise of its schools. And we got a great CFO out of that search. Thank you. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Christy Perry, who many of you know or know of her great work in Salem-Keizer, and I'm just jazzed she's on our team. Christy?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for you to know, first and foremost, about our local reach as a firm. We, of course, Human Capital did the superintendent search in Salem-Keizer last year. I got to follow that. I got to be up close and kind of personally observing very intimately the work. I was fortunate enough at the time to have a board that trusted me enough as their superintendent to help, be along the way as a close observer. So I got to see up close when things would start to get a little rocky, how Hank and his colleagues were able to help the board in those moments. And when they didn't quite get the community outreach they wanted, they were quick to pivot and go right back in to get more, because that happens in every search. You just cannot predict. So, but first and foremost, our commitment locally. You can see that in the people that are on our team and in the searches that Human Capital has done, both large and small districts. And if there's anyone that's invested in Oregon schools and the success of Oregon schools, I might be like leader of the pack in those. And I've always said, when Portland succeeds, when Salem Keizer succeeds, the state succeeds. And so for me, as an Oregonian, it's critically important, the next leader. So I put my whole heart into that selection process with you if Human Capital gets the job. But also Bellevue, Seattle, Beaverton. And if you look at the next slide, these are some of the other local districts that Human Capital has worked with, both community college, ESDs, and school districts. And it makes for a very broad reach, both in the outreach and in the type of candidates that some might be more non-traditional that you can recruit because of the breadth of experience of Human Capital. All right, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Hector.
Thank you. And I'm going to talk about our national reach. We're very proud that our consultants have experience in searches on both coasts and the Midwest, ranging from large school districts like Houston ISD to smaller rural districts. Our reach allows us to attract candidates from throughout the country. Most recently, our Beaverton and Bellevue semifinalists came from Texas, Alabama, Massachusetts, and Mississippi, to name just a few. We seek talent at major conferences like the annual AASA National Conference, as well as staying in touch with talented leaders from throughout the U.S. Next slide, please. Designing the right search for you is critical. We know that every school district is different. Therefore, we want to design a process that is tailored to what works for you. We're going to achieve this by really listening to you and key staff members. Let me give you a quick example of this sort of collaboration from what we did at Forest Grove School District recently, where the school district asked us to really engage the Spanish-speaking Latino community. We heard that and designed a process where, after speaking to the parents, they really felt like the school district had put a little bit of extra effort in getting their voice to be heard. That was really meaningful, and I'm sure that the residents there felt it was very powerful for the board to take that extra step to make them feel heard and welcome to the process. We essentially want to build a process that has some flexibility, but is keenly focused in on finding the right candidate for your school district. Let me pass it on to our next colleague.
Thanks, Hector. As you know from our proposal, our search process has 5 phases. They include planning, public engagement, recruitment, selection, and transition phases. As Dr. Garcia mentioned, our process is tailored to the unique needs of each board and community we serve. So selected, we'd map out that process together at the planning meeting, tentatively identified on our proposed timeline in early February. This evening, we'd like to highlight the following phases: community engagement, recruitment, and selection. Extensive community engagement is achieved through 40 virtual focus groups, a full-day consultant-led in-person focus group sessions, one-on-one interviews with the board and key stakeholders, a community-wide online survey in multiple languages, and targeted outreach to underrepresented voices that are often not heard. We work closely with district staff to ensure that historically marginalized voices get elevated in our searches. Broad and deep engagement informs the firm on district strengths and challenges, and to identify the leadership qualities, attributes, and experiences desired in your next superintendent of schools. The next superintendent criteria is the culmination of all of our community and public engagement work. It's presented to the board in a public session with an opportunity for additional public input and refinement in a follow-up board work session. I think it's important to note that it is critically important to this process to overlay a communication plan that provides regular updates to the community at key mileposts in the process, including how to participate. Recruitment. As Hank mentioned, we do traditional advertising of postings, but unlike many regional and national firms, we maintain that national listserv with over 40,000 subscribers from all across the country and international subscribers. Most subscribers are not actively pursuing their next opportunity. We have broad regional and national networks and affiliations, including the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators, the Washington Association of School Administrators, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, the National Alliance of Black School Educators, and ASA that we activate. Our personal relationships and connections with the leadership of each of those associations matters. We know we'll have applicants who are in fact pursuing their next leadership opportunity. However, we also find that candidates who may fit your next superintendent ideal profile often aren't considering a career move. That's why we activate these networks, and we ask a pretty simple question. Do you know of anyone in your network who might fit this next superintendent ideal profile? And we go one step further. We also ask them to ask colleagues in their networks if they know anyone who fits that ideal profile. It's this activation and cascading recruitment efforts through these networks and affiliations that builds strong, diverse, and deep pools of highly qualified applicants for our district clients. Selection. We recommend a rigorous vetting process, which includes 4 rounds, I repeat, 4 rounds of interviews. This is inclusive of 3 confidential community interviews of finalists, extensive referencing conducted by the firm and by the board, and a comprehensive background check. Throughout each vetting and evaluation step, we adhere to a rigorous process that anchors the evaluation of an applicant against the board-adopted next superintendent criteria. We coach, we train, we facilitate to ensure adherence to the process for fairness and equitable evaluation of applicants. Next slide, please. So again, how do we find the right people? Well, again, we activate these networks to enlist a cadre of recruiters. Our prospect list is large, it grows, and we continue to curate that list to meet the needs of district clients. So our commitment to you and to this community is we're going to get this right together. We're going to deliver an unparalleled search experience that places an extraordinary educational leader to serve as your next superintendent of schools. One who possesses the right skill set and leadership disposition to navigate the current context, to build upon the district's success and strategic foundation established by this board and Superintendent Guerrero, and one who has staying power for the long run. Next slide. I'm going to hand this off to my colleague, Dr. Tammy Campbell.
Actually, I'm going to jump in and then Dr. Campbell's going to take the next slide. I want to, before I talk about the slide, I want to maybe just reiterate a couple of things that Steve spoke about. So we think about the community engagement phase, which is really deep. And Steve went through rather quickly, but I hope you saw it in our proposal, a significant number of focus groups and engagements that we would like to have. across the community with affinity groups, with individuals who care deeply about Portland Public Schools, and maybe folks who are disenfranchised or disenchanted. We also want to make sure we're meeting with students deeply and really hearing their voices. So we talk about the community engagement as a very key critical phase, and we know, board, we hear you talking about that in your board meetings as well. We then end with or conclude that portion with, as Steve was describing, the next superintendent criteria, and we move into recruitment. I do want to say, and I've learned this being an HR guy, recruitment is actually a technical skill. It actually takes hard work. And when Steve talks about the networks of networks, it really is about calling from within our networks to go beyond our network. We're going to be asking you, board members and other stakeholders in Portland, who do you know that we should call? You might not know the person who's going to be the next superintendent, but you know people who know people. And we're going to pick your brains and your Rolodexes and reach out to folks, because that's how you really find your great pool. People ask us, and I'm now going to move on to this slide. People ask us, how do you get, no, go back, the one I didn't talk about yet. Thank you. People will say, look, how do you get, especially in this era when we all know there is not as much incredible talent in leadership, and I've pulled 4 of them into my team, right? So they're not available to be your next superintendent. People say, how do you go out and get great leaders in this era? And how do you get a diverse pool of really highly talented individuals? Well, I want to tell you about our 3 most recent large searches. I'm not going to name names here, but in our proposal, you've asked us about our 3 most like Portland proposals. And I want you to just look at these numbers. So the first district I'll speak of, and I'll just call it District 1, 5 semifinalists, of whom 3 were BIPOC, 3 female, 2 bilingual. That board was really impressed with the caliber of the individuals who sat for the semifinals. I'm going to say the same thing about the other 2 districts as well, just spoiler alert. We bring really talented people to the table. District 2, 7 semifinalists, 5 BIPOC, 3 female, 3 bilinguals. District 3, 6 semifinalists, 5 BIPOC, 3 female, 4 bilingual. There happened to actually be in each of those searches an individual who self-identified as a sexual minority as well. So how do we do that? Well, we do it. And we do it, and I'll say it again, through reaching out. We don't have a cadre of people that we're plotting to put into certain district leadership roles. We are out there looking at your criteria and at your community, and we are going out to people we know and saying, who do you know fits this criteria? Who should we talk to? And we get there. And that's why when you see the districts where we have done searches and you see the folks who are sitting in leadership roles, you're seeing incredibly gifted people who have assumed those roles. Thank you. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Campbell.
Good evening, members of the board. I want to say the first thing I think about as a former superintendent, the team itself is going to sell who's going to be interested to apply. I know when I looked to be a superintendent, I looked at the board team itself. And as I watched you, as I joined the Zoom today to see that connectedness and camaraderie, that's a huge part of this successful process of the team. So deeply attending to the process and working as a team, because again, future prospective candidates will be looking to see the cohesiveness of the governance team. Making sure that once we make agreements, not working outside the process, so that we have that coherent, clear, consistent work all the way through. If you have questions about the process, raise them early so that we can make those adjustments and then moving forward with those agreed upon channels. And then be high functioning in all your public interactions. Candidates will be interviewing you as well as you will be interviewing them. And so it's so important to sort of let folks know the great work that's happening in Portland Public Schools. I know when I was in Federal Way Public Schools, we often looked to Portland because of your reputation around the work that you were doing, specifically in the instructional core, specifically the work you were doing around inclusion, specifically the work you were doing around closing gaps. And so that word of mouth gets out there. And these are other components that you can use to certainly to attract the very best candidates.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. As we move toward the end of our slide presentation, I want to clarify that. So you've asked us to address 9 questions in our presentation, and I believe we have, although we have not answered them in the sequence necessarily that you've asked them. So I'm actually going to give you a 15, 20-second break, board, and just look over those questions and just think about whether we've got a couple more slides that are going to hit a couple more pieces. We don't want to leave anything out, and we know you've asked some deliberate and thoughtful questions. So take a look through your questions. Make sure you've heard most or all of them already, and to the extent that maybe you haven't, or if you feel like you haven't, then when we're finished with the presentation, we certainly want to respond to any questions that you didn't feel like we got to. But I think you're going to hear or see that the 9 questions that you've asked, we are attending to. So your 20 seconds starts right now. Okay. Board, I want to talk about a couple of things. One is about, you asked some questions about kind of what happens if we need to pivot or what happens if there's challenges. And I think my colleagues earlier spoke about every search has some interesting and unexpected pieces that show up. And it's about how we respond in the moment to keep things on track and move them forward. In my first slide, and I didn't speak to it directly, but in my first slide, I mentioned that our team brings both superintendent and human resources leadership experience. And those are 2 different skill sets, and they come really in handy when you have a challenging moment in your search, and sometimes you do. So we are a team of 5 that bring variety of skill sets. You are wise as a board, but we think that we can help you because as that second bullet point says, things happen along the way, and our firm has the experience and acumen to intervene. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to read you a quote from a district that actually had an unusual thing happen. It was nobody's fault, and spoke to how we managed that. I also want to talk a little bit about technology. One of the things that I experienced both sitting in the seat as an HR director and in my early years as a recruiting consultant is that the software that's used to collect applications, particularly in K-12 education, is often somewhat antiquated. And I think that we have actually one of the slickest, and I use that word in a very positive sense, softwares that are user-friendly, not only from the candidate perspective, but from the board perspective. And so you'll find it super easy to log in, to see applications, to communicate with us as your consultants. Sometimes, we absolutely have to be committed, of course, to open records. And we also want to maintain confidentiality of candidates. And those things can both live in the same world. But sometimes if you don't have a really strong software program, things can get slippery, or people start sending text messages with candidates' names, which is not something we want to do. So we have a system that I think manages that really well, and we're excited to introduce that to you at the right time. In addition, every district has strengths within technology. Some districts have some great communication tools that get the word out to folks and parents and students and staff. And we will be delighted to work with anything that you have, and certainly anything that you think will add value to the search. We want to hear about it and learn from that, but we want to work with you and your systems to make sure that we are capitalizing on all that the district has in order to do this work. Let's go to the next slide. I love this quote because we had a board member in Beaverton that insisted and was determined that we were going to bring a group of outstanding, racially diverse, highly talented leaders. And we did. And I was so honored when she sent me a note that said exactly that. I was grateful for that, and also very proud that we had actually done that work. Next one. From Christie's district. I think I'll just let you read that. I don't need to read it out loud to you. And let's go to the next slide. HCE's, which is our acronym for Human Capital Enterprises, HCE's commitment to the goals set by the board and community could not have been more exceptional, and this was not your typical search. The time, energy, and expertise to work through the search was exceptional. There were at least 2 issues that were not just tricky, but had the potential to derail the entire process and damage the outcome. Mr. Harris could provide detail, but suffice to say his leadership and experience serves the district exceptionally well. I watched him exercise amazing flexibility that made the difference between success and failure. It's very kind of her to put my name in there. Steve was my terrific partner on that search. We, as I said in that love slide way back then, we do this work because we love this work. We love the impact this work has. And when we get comments like this, it's truly heartwarming. It truly warms the heart because this is what we're all about and this is what we care about. And we know how to execute, and we love the result of the execution because it pays dividends for an entire community and the children of the community. And that's what you're all here for. And so I think that's the last slide. Christy, is there another slide? That's the last slide. So I want to thank you on behalf of my whole team. I know you have additional questions or conversations you want to engage in. Thank you for allowing us to share with you a bit about who we are.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation. So what we'll do is, we won't have time to go through all of our questions. So I think what we'll do is I ask any board member if they have any follow-up questions that they have, and we have roughly 5-10 minutes. But we have 5 minutes to do follow-up questions, and then we'll leave the last 10 minutes for you guys to do your closing remarks. All right, so board, anybody have any follow-up questions?
I have a quick question, and that's whether you, when you're screening your pool of applicants, if you take into consideration how they've performed in previous districts, specifically how they've closed the achievement gap or gotten it closer together, the difference between the achievement of white kids and kids of color. Is that part of your screening criteria?
Yes. Does anybody want to grab that, or do you, Christy, do you want to grab that? No. You want me to grab that, Christy? There's a couple places within the, I don't want to give too much away for candidates who might be watching this, but there are a couple different places in the process where we ask folks to specifically speak to successes in achievement and the work around equity in really specific ways for candidates. And I must say that is a very telling thing. It's half of the answer to your question, Director DePass. It's not the entirety, because somebody can say something that maybe isn't accurate. But let's start with somebody's ability to distinctly state how achievement has improved under your leadership. And let's talk about what is your greatest accomplishment with respect to equity? And there's an awful lot of people that struggle to answer those questions. So that's one of the places that we go, and you'll see that's in the interview questions from the early part of the selection process. The other thing, which is maybe tangential, but maybe not, is the reference call portion of the selection when you get to your finalists is really critical. And we've learned over the years how to do it well as opposed to how to do it less well. So I want to describe to you real briefly what that looks like. If Hector is one of your 3 finalists, I'm going to say to Hector, here are the 12 people I want to talk to in both your district and some in your previous district. I am not inviting Hector to give me 12 names of people he wants me to talk to. I'm going to Hector and I'm saying, I want to talk to this kind of principal, secondary principal, elementary principal, a special ed director, a CFO, a combination between your most recent and past, depending on how long ago you were in that past. And I want to ask those specific questions about skill set. And actually, board members are engaged in that process too. And so that's also getting at some of those issues that sometimes, another candidate might just sort of softly pass over, yeah, I did this, or yeah, I did that. We really want to get the details and the data of what somebody has accomplished in their time. And for a position like superintendent of Portland Public Schools, that data should be robust and accessible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, any other board questions?
Director Brim-Edwards?
Director Brim-Edwards, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That wasn't my place to call.
That's okay. Director Brim-Edwards?
Thanks. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about the what is the output of the 40 stakeholder interviews and how that informs the process. So obviously 40 groups, people feel good about, like, they've been engaged, they've been listened to, but how does it actually inform the process, and how do you filter out useful information and information that maybe should be filtered out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's I'll start, and then I might ask if any of my teammates want to join me. So I love that question because it's real, right? So you're in a group of 6 or 7 individuals who have their stories to tell, and they want to talk and they want to share with you what they would like to see happen. Our key questions drive at what is going great in Portland. I'm going to distill these for the sake of time, but what's going great in Portland Public Schools? What are the challenges and complexities in Portland Public Schools? And what are your dreams and aspirations? If you, citizen, staff person, student, if you were sitting on the school board, what would you be looking for in terms of characteristics and qualities? As you can imagine, folks will sometimes answer those questions in either more succinct ways, or there's stories to hear, right? And those are important to hear also. So our job as consultants and listeners and maybe even ethnographers is to hear the stories and to pull out the key pieces that really speak to those individual things, because we need to know what's great in PPS. We need to know what are the complexities and challenges that the new soup are going to face. And we need to bring to you ultimately that criteria document that speaks to, board, here's what the community says if they were sitting in your shoes, they would look at. So those focus groups sort of take a whole lot of input, just as you're describing, Director Brim-Edwards, and we do our best to sort of to be good listeners so that we learn the story of PPS, and at the same time distill it down to the sort of the manageable chunks that can be that can source the next superintendent criteria document. We do similar things with surveys. Surveys are a little bit different because you don't have quite the same sort of context as you do in a focus group. But that's how we do it. And there's really 2 objectives. And maybe your question started with what are the objectives? There's really 2 objectives. One is to be able to build that next superintendent criteria, to come to you 6 weeks, 2 months from now and say, board, of all the hundreds of voices and maybe thousands of voices we've heard, here are your 12 or 14 critical items that people want you to look for. That's really hard to do when you're hearing thousands of voices to get it down to 14. But if we brought you 50, it would be kind of useless. So it really does need to be a manageable, chunkable amount. So one of our objectives is to be able to craft that document. And the other objective is for us as your recruiting team to learn your district so well that we can go out and speak to candidates and speak intelligently about, here's what this job is, and here are the rewards of this job, and here are the things you need to be prepared to handle. And here, we want people walking in with their eyes wide open, right? Like we don't want to be hiding the truth. We want people to walk into this job ready to be smashingly successful as your next superintendent of schools.
Could I just add one real example from the Salem Kaiser search? Out of all that listening they do, one thing that came out that I was thrilled that came out, but was surprising because it came out from all these groups, was that Salem Kaiser valued student voice and allows students to make help in the decision-making process. So this comes out of all these groups, and I watched the school board all of a sudden wrestle with, well, what does that mean in this moment about our search? And so they even from that feedback pivoted their search process ever so slightly to add more student voice to the selection. So that's how the input affected the process. And it made it to one of the the profiles statements. So it can really be powerful. And then I watched the board and human capital point that out into the community in those public meetings. And I think then people could see that their voices mattered.
And Hank, if I could add just one additional thing, it is more art than science. I've spent the last 2 days sorting through 65 11 font pages of data input for search that we're working in the greater Portland metro area. It's critically important to achieve those two outcomes because it is about placement of a superintendent within the context of the challenges and the strengths in a way that enables that person to hit the ground running. And as I mentioned in my remarks, having staying power for the long run. So it's complex work, but it's exciting work. Sometimes it's exhausting to make sense out of all of that. But I think what's really unique about the way in which we triangulate the data in the input, we have a specific style and voice that is uncommon in this space. And I think that will resonate with your broader community.
Thank you, Director Sullivan.
Yes, I was wondering, you probably mentioned it in all this, but to be more specific about how you communicate with the greater public about what's going on with the search. You know, what can you share, what don't you? Because our community really likes to know what's happening.
I'm going to start that out and then turn it over to Steve, who is really quite expert in this area. The one thing I want to just preface by saying, there's two options that we can go. One is you do have a communications team, of course, in PPS. I'm going to ask Steve to talk about how we work with communications teams, and we do all the time. But we also heard in an earlier board meeting that there might be interest in us bringing in communications support, which we are absolutely prepared to do that. We've done in other districts. We're doing one right now that's also been exceptional. So it's up to you however you want to do that. But Steve, will you talk about what it looks like when we work on communications with the communications team?
As I mentioned in my comments, we overlay a communication plan with our timeline for the search. And typically we have somewhere between 5 and 6 superintendent search updates. There are lots of other messages that are being sent out relative to engagement opportunities, but we work really closely with whoever is assigned as the district communication lead. Someone from our search team will be assigned as the liaison with the district communication lead. So we work together on planning the sequence of communication updates to the public, and then we backwards map that in a manner that allows us to be timely and ensuring that the template messages that we might provide as a starting point, that communications person assigned as the district lead has plenty of opportunity to tailor that given the context of the district and the community. As Hank mentioned, sometimes districts will say our communications team needs some support with this additional layer of work. And we'll assign a communications consultant that will provide that kind of support. But there will still need to be some integration with that communication lead so that we're working together in terms of distribution, in terms of media, and in terms of follow through on execution, the execution of that communication timeline.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. We have about 8 more minutes. So if you guys want to go ahead and do your closing remarks, that would be great.
Super. Thank you so much. Let me see if any of my associates would like to begin a close.
I'll say we would be thrilled to support you. We know Portland Public, and we know the promise that you bring to students in your district and across Oregon, and it would be our greatest pleasure to serve. And we think we could really serve you well. You've got lots to offer, and you can recruit an outstanding candidate to this position.
And Christy, thank you. I would add the following. We each personally and professionally have a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We live that. It's our lived experience. We've worked in diverse suburban and urban systems supporting children of very diverse communities. And we would be honored to support you in this superintendent selection process.
I will add, it's an inspiration to be in a space where you hear board of directors talking about results, talking about closing gaps. As a superintendent in a district where we had almost 8 out of 10 of our scholars who were attending advanced placement courses and moving the needle. And we couldn't do that unless our board of directors really sponsored that work and were right there. And there's something pretty exciting about joining a team who's so clear about this. And because of the work that I do nationally, being a part of networks where I can participate and collaborate with this group to bring the kind of talent right in front of you excites me. And so I've just worked so closely and watched the work of Portland Public Schools, and you are a desired place to be. So just very nice to meet you, and I look forward to the potential and the possibilities.
I know it's getting close to the end, so I just want to add just my 2 cents from what Dr. Campbell talked about, and that is we are looking forward not only to do the kind of work that will attract people in your area, but we're looking forward to that national search. We know that Portland schools can draw interest from people out in the Midwest and East Coast and throughout the country. So we're excited to get those networks going and to bring extremely well qualified people to the table.
I don't know if I can add anything to what my great colleagues just said. So I will say board and Liz and Roseanne, and I don't know if I still see Kara, and Director Silverstein. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. And we wish you the best, whichever direction you go. We are rooting for Portland all the way.
Oh, good. Thank you once again for being here. We speak for everyone. I think we really enjoyed the presentation. And we just thank you guys once again for your passion for Portland, the time that you guys taken to put this together and meet with us. So we want to just give you our thanks for that as well. We guys will be hearing from us shortly, and we hope you guys have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We got till 9:30 for the next one. So you got about
a break.
17 minutes.
What time is it in their time zone? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know.
It's late.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one starts at 9:30 and it goes to how long?
10:30.
I think the other search firm is in this.
Hello, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you guys for coming today. We really appreciate, especially at the late time it is for you guys. Just kind of want to give a brief rundown of how it's kind of go tonight. We'll just give a brief introduction of who we are on the PPS side. Then you guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves, go over your presentation. Then after that, if we have time for questions, we will do that. We will we have additional time. We will ask you guys if you guys have questions of us. if time permits. If time doesn't permit, we'll just go ahead and just ask you guys to give your closing remarks. And then that'll be it. So we want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Gary Hollins. I'm the chair of Portland Public School Board. Born and raised here in Portland, Oregon, kid of PPS. So that's who I am. I will pass it over to Director Wong.
Hi, my name is Eddie Wong. I'm also a board member, also a former teacher in PPS, and a current parent as well. Thank you. I'll pass it to Patty.
Hi, my name is Patty Sullivan. I'm a board member, also a former teacher. I did have a couple of children in Portland Public Schools ages ago, but they're all grown up now. And I'm going to pass it to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Michelle DePass. I'm a board member as well and a PPS parent and the daughter and granddaughter of PPS teachers and a graduate of the system as well. Thanks. I'll pass it to Julia.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Julia Brum-Edwards. I've been on the board for 10 years. I was a PPS parent for 18 years, and I'm a PPS grad as well. And I'm going to pass it to my board colleague from North Portland, Director Green.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Herman Green. I am the vice chair of the board. I am a PPS parent. I did not graduate from PPS. I came out of Buffalo, New York, and came here where it rains as much as it snows there. And I will pass it over to, let's see, my guy, Andrew.
Thanks, Herman. Hi, Andrew Scott. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a school board member, also a parent, and also a graduate. And welcome. I'll pass it over to our student director, Frankie.
Hi, I'm Frankie Silverstein. I use she, they pronouns. I'm currently a junior at Franklin, and I will pass it to Roseanne.
Hello, good evening. My name is Roseanne Powell, and I'm the board manager, and I will pass it to Kara.
Hi, Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant in the board office. And since we're talking about it, I'm also a PPS graduate and have one kid that graduated, another one that's about to.
And you're going to pass it to Liz.
Hi, good evening. I'm Liz Large, the district's contracted general counsel and the parent of two PPS graduates. And I think we are acknowledging our hero, Terry, who makes all of this technology work in the background.
All right, way to go, Terry. All right, so we're going to hand it over to you guys, and we will sit and listen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for making the time to meet with us tonight. Do I have the ability to share screen? Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sylvia Flowers, and I am the Managing Director of our Executive Search and Talent Acquisition practice here at Alma Advisory Group. I want to allow my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we will get started. I'll turn it to Eliana.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eliana Pereira, and I use ella, she, and her pronouns. I am joining you by way of Georgia, but originally from New York City. And I have to say, when we moved to Georgia, I didn't realize the amount of precipitation we get here. So I am feeling you on that piece. I am a social worker by trade, and I've also had the opportunity to serve in New York City public schools and in a school district here in Georgia before joining the incredible Alma team. And I'm very excited to share a little bit more about our practice and meeting you all this evening. and I will turn it over to my colleague, Nita.
Good evening. Nice to meet you all. My name is Nita Lasapunkel, joining you from Dallas, Texas, although also originally from New York, but moved to Dallas by way of Reno, Nevada, so not the most direct route. I support the ALMA team in primarily on the data side when it comes to community engagement data, survey data, as well as later on we can talk a little bit more about some of our practices, but also final interview data. And here to help support in any way I can. Nice to meet you all.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Again, my name is Sylvia Flowers. I am based in Nashville, Tennessee, but born in Chicago and have lived in a lot of states in between. And I bring you greetings from our founder and CEO, Monica Santana Rosen. She is out of the office this week with her son, who is a junior figure skater and is potentially going to be on the Olympic men's team in a few years. So they are in a competition right now. But she does bring you greetings and thanks you for the opportunity. A little bit about ALMA Advisory Group. Monica is the daughter of immigrant parents, also born in New York City. And she founded ALMA Advisory Group in 2016. So we'll be celebrating our 8-year anniversary. And really our mission is to cultivate the conditions where people and organizations can do their best work on behalf of the students they serve. And the word ALMA means to foster. And for us, it is really about fostering great relationships with our clients, as well as building that capacity to do this work. I want to share with you the group of people who would be dedicated to the search. You've met Eliana. I'm Sylvia again. We also have Naja Thompson, who is our recruiter, does a lot of our recruiting work and sourcing work to find outstanding candidates. You've met Nita tonight. We also have Josette Tucker, who is a 25-year educator, served as a teacher, principal, central office administrator, and then head of HR in district in Delaware. And then Venus Velez, who also supports the team. She is based in New York City. She does a lot of our business operations work, as well as leading searches and supporting on community engagement. I would say I haven't tallied up the numbers, but many of us here have worked in urban school districts across the country in various capacities. I'm sure if I added the numbers up, it would be well over 150 years of experience there. In terms of our superintendent search experience, we started our work really focused on. Board Member Hollins, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I can't see a screen. I don't know
You
if I'm the only one.
cannot see my screen.
I just have a black screen.
I can see the presentation.
So can I.
And I can see it as well.
So can I.
It's just you,
If I
Gary.
stop.
Yeah, it's just me, I guess.
It's just you, Gary.
And I like how
Try
everybody
again.
and I like how everybody just called me out. Well, I can see it and I can see it.
I just reshared. Can you see it now?
I cannot, but go ahead on.
Too many windows open.
No worries.
All right.
I'm seeing
Let me
I'm
try
seeing
one
it
more
for you,
time.
Gary.
Okay. A lot of our work started in the human capital and talent space, and we started working with school districts on how to redesign and reimagine human resources and human capital, and focused on building strategies to recruit and retain teachers and leaders. From that work, our district clients began to ask us, could you help us find the next cabinet level member, chief of this, chief of that. And then that led to our first superintendent search, which was Denver Public Schools. Currently, in this school year, we're working on 3 superintendent searches. We're working with Madison Metropolitan School District. We are about to enter the finalist stage for that search. We're working with Dayton Public Schools in Dayton, Ohio. We're about to enter into the finalist stage for that search. And then we're working with Lawrence Public Schools in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is a district in state receivership. And we are about to launch the job profile for that search right now. I wanted to share a few of our searches and success stories. Cincinnati Public Schools was one of our early superintendent searches. We took a lot of time up front in this search to engage the community and really get to know what's most important to them and all stakeholders. And we were balancing during this search a board that was going to have a turnover of 3 board members, potentially 3 to 4 board members, with an election happening in the middle of the search. And so we did a really strong effort to make sure that the incoming board members were brought into the process almost immediately after the election in November, and that they were thoughtful partners up until the swearing in. And we had both the outgoing and the incoming board members as part of the team up through the finalist and selection round. Ohio is a state that has very generous sunshine laws, and so balancing an active recruiting profile while also making sure that candidates were aware that their names would be released upon application is something that we deal with in Ohio as well as in Florida. Ultimately, that search resulted in 3 finalists, 1 internal candidate and 2 external candidates. And we're pleased to announce that Ironetta Wright was announced as the superintendent with a unanimous vote, both of the incoming and outgoing board members. Evanston Township High School, which is north of Chicago. This was a unique search in that they believed that they had an internal successor for the role. And we entered this relationship really talking through how we would approach managing a potential external candidate. What we did in this case is we really engaged the community to design the job profile. And once we aligned the job profile, we then worked with the internal candidate and the board to design a process that allowed the internal candidate to really demonstrate to the board and to the community his readiness for the role. And as you can see in this, the picture, the board then unanimously selected the internal candidate as the sole finalist. And upon his appointment, they all wore T-shirts that said Team of 8, just to show that the 7 board members were really aligned with his internal promotion to the role. And lastly, I'll point out Cleveland Metropolitan School District. Cleveland is a district that is under the Cleveland plan, has mayoral control. And so it's a unique situation where the mayor appoints the board members. And in that case, again, Ohio, where there are very generous sunshine laws, we work very closely with the board, the mayor's office, and the mayor's chief of education to design a process that really aligned to the community's needs, and that was grounded in the continuation of the work that had been started under the Cleveland plan. The outgoing CEO, Eric Gordon, had been in place for 11 years, had spent a tremendous amount of time in Cleveland, and was really committed to supporting the process and ensuring that his successor had a successful transition. We introduced Dr. Warren Morgan to the district in April. Dr. Morgan had worked in Cleveland Metropolitan School District as a principal and then a network leader, and then left the district to pursue other things and came back and received unanimous support for the board in that case, from the board and the mayor's office in that case. And then lastly, Denver Public Schools, which was our first superintendent search. This one, again, the district was dealing with a lot of very community-centered issues. And so we again prioritized the various needs of the community and the different regions across the district. We developed a nomination process where anyone in the community could nominate themselves or others to be a part of the finalist interview rounds. We designed case studies and small panel interviews, including a student-led interview panel. We were able to find 3 amazing finalists to introduce to the community. And in that case, Dr. Alex Marrero was named as superintendent in Denver Public Schools, and where he continues to serve to this day. So why Portland Public Schools? Well, we've worked with the other Portland Public Schools in Portland, Maine. So we want to work with the Portland on the West Coast. We know that this is the largest district in Oregon. We've also worked in Eugene, Oregon, a couple of years ago. We have deep appreciation for your current strategic plan that prioritizes issues that are very important to us, specifically racial equity, inclusion, and excellence. And then we've seen the numerous support from the community on your facilities work and the needs of revitalizing and improving the schools. And we just believe that this is a community that we would love to get to know a little bit better. One of the questions that you asked was in number 2. How will you go about learning what the key strengths are of our next leader? And can you share methods you use to interview senior staff and education experts? And we wanted to share a little bit about our profile and what we do at the beginning, which is we want to start with a needs assessment. We want to get to know the district. This starts with a community engagement. And for us, it's coming on site to Portland, making time for focus groups, interviews with all stakeholders, doing our research, digging into any background materials, digging deeper into the strategic plan, and using that information to craft the job profile. We don't have a cookie cutter superintendent job description. We really want to hear from the community and from the board before we draft the job description. And that job description and alignment on the key competencies really sets the foundation for the entire search process from there. And I just jumped right into the questions. Is that okay? Okay. Your next question was, what strategies do you use to explore candidates that are already connected to the district to ensure quality local candidates are not overlooked? I shared the example of Evanston Township High School where there was an internal candidate identified. I will tell you, we do use an applicant tracking system that helps us track all candidates. And we do have a dedicated recruiter, Naja Thompson, who is specifically focused on identifying candidates for the position that are aligned to the needs of the district. We recruit people who are actively looking, but also not looking. So we are looking for people with connections to this community, who may have moved away. We are prioritizing the diversity of the candidate pool. And of course, we take recommendations and we will call and track down anyone whose name is presented to us. For internal candidates specifically, one, we know that it can be a very sensitive and delicate situation to deal with internal candidates, and we believe that internal candidates should be treated, with the utmost respect and care. I think we pride ourselves on high-touch candidate communication, so we are going to communicate with candidates at every step of the way. For an internal candidate, we want to make sure that the board feels comfortable with either us having conversations with internal candidates, or if people on the board have close relationships with those folks, we want to make sure that any internal candidate feels like they've been given a fair shot, that they've been held to the highest standards, but also that their contributions and their work and commitment to the district are recognized and valued. We will evaluate all candidates against the competencies, and our process really is designed to mitigate bias, and that could be for folks who are known to the district as well as not known to the district. I'll pause to see if my colleagues want to add anything there, because I do think that's an area where we take great pride. All right.
I think that sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add that the amount of time upfront that we take to really understand the competencies is something we take very seriously. And I know we'll touch on it in a bit in a few slides, but just to highlight the care and the nuance that I think our team is able to pull out, given all of the research, all of the meetings, all of the communications that we do in the beginning of the process, allows us just to have a much deeper understanding of the needs of the community, which is why our job descriptions or our job profiles are so tailored to each of the engagements that we're a part of. So I'm excited for you to better understand our process, and also happy to answer any questions that you have with regards to that.
Your next question was, how do you go about ensuring a diverse and inclusive pool of candidates who match our candidate profile? As I mentioned, our process goes back to the competencies. We want to design a process that mitigates bias. We ensure that everyone who is a part of an interview goes through our anti-bias training. What we found is when we stay grounded in the competencies, candidates of color and women tend to make it through the selection rounds at much higher rates than they otherwise would. And you can see from the data on our searches that the majority of finalists presented by ALMA have been people of color and women. And in terms of the final candidate, the final selected candidate, you will see that the majority of our final candidates who've been hired have been people of color, and we're slightly below 50% in terms of women candidates. You will see where, as you saw from our beginning slide, we are a diverse organization. Many of the people on our team share the lived experiences of the students that you serve and the students in many urban districts across the country. And so we are especially attuned also through our own networks to attracting and finding candidates who help us identify additional diverse candidates. Your next question was provide information on the criteria and methods utilized for evaluating superintendent candidates and what steps can be guaranteed, what steps can be taken to guarantee a thorough evaluation. So for us, it comes back to a process that mitigates bias, and that starts with clarity of the competencies. When the board is aligned around what they're looking for, then everything that follows goes back to that. So we design a competency and evidence-based process. We use examples and scenarios that are revealed to us during that initial community engagement. We have a very structured interview process, typically 3 to 4 rounds of interviews. We want to see multiple interviewers engaging in conversations with potential candidates so that we're getting diversity of opinions, diversity of thought. And then we want to create a safe space for our interviewers where we can name our biases openly, but then also have a culture of questioning one another for evidence, acknowledging we may have a bias in this area, and also stating, and this is what I heard that ties back to the competencies. And then we want to facilitate your debrief conversations at every interview round so that we're really eliciting what strengths you heard, what questions you still have, what would you still want, what else you would want to know if a candidate was to move forward. And so that facilitated debrief really leads to, I think, a thoughtful and inclusive process. And it guarantees that all voices are heard in that conversation. Question 6. When faced with challenges that may come up during the search process, like unforeseen issues or leading candidates dropping out of the process or an inadequate pool of qualified candidates, how do you handle them? Well, we take several steps to mitigate any possible challenges. First, we're going to create a detailed project plan. I would say on average, a search for the ALMA team takes anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks. But we don't have any artificial deadlines in terms of our application pool. So one of my mottos is always be sourcing. So we're always sourcing candidates from the beginning of the process until you all sign the contract on the dotted line. We don't have a deadline for accepting applications because we know in the spring there's active recruiting happening for a number of positions across the country. So we are looking for candidates at all times, and we are selling this opportunity to people up until someone signs on the dotted line because we know these things can happen. We also want to have a clear communication strategy. So as I mentioned, we have very high-touch communication with potential candidates. So we're keeping them informed on where we are in the process. We're also wanting them to keep us informed if they're involved in any other processes so that we can let the board know these are the potential areas where we might need to go fast. We can go slow. We have a little more time. So we are managing all of that. And then I think another challenge that we try to plan for is having that district level support to help with communications, to help with keeping the media engaged, sharing information with the district on where the search is, providing updates through your board meetings on where the search is going, so that the community is also informed. Question 7, what are the 2 to 3 most important things for the board to do to ensure a successful recruitment and hiring of a superintendent profile and position description? Again, alignment on those key requirements. Of the other thing that helps us to ensure a successful search is that communication and outreach. We want to make sure that the community feels well informed, that they feel like this is a transparent search, that they can get information on the process. And then I think you can't underestimate truly the time commitment that is involved with leading a superintendent search. And this is from the board's perspective. We want to proactively try to manage your calendar and the obligations for participating in interviews and evaluating candidates. The time commitment, particularly as we get deeper into the selection process, is probably one of the major things that the board can do, is really dedicate the time it takes so that you feel confident when it's time to present finalists to the community, that you know as much about these candidates as you possibly can before you introduce them to the community. Question 8 was, how can technology and data be effectively utilized in the search process, specifically for candidate assessments and market analysis? So, targeted sourcing and networking, we use a variety of avenues to find and identify candidates. Some of this is, old school telephone. Some of this is through LinkedIn and other methods. But our targeted sourcing and networking is the first step. I think secondly, we do have a robust applicant tracking system. When we post a job on our applicant tracking system, it automatically posts to about 17 or 18 other job boards. And then we'll also have a more targeted list of job boards and opportunity pages that will present to you in terms of casting a wide net for the position. Of course, in this day and age, we're meeting over Zoom. I think we got leverage technology in terms of doing virtual interviews, simultaneous interviews, and there's a lot of functionality within our applicant tracking system to do some pre-screening questions, as well as video interviews if that is of interest. And then lastly, we'll begin to do some initial background screening, making sure that we are checking the backgrounds, any media, Google searching, any social media screens. We'll want to have that information as well before we get to the finalist stage on any candidate that you would consider. And then your last question was, what makes your firm stand out from other superintendent search firms, and why should our district choose your services? You've seen our results in terms of attracting a diverse pool, and we really think that that comes down to these 4 key areas. Authentic community voice and transparency is first and foremost. We want to spend the first 4 weeks of this engagement getting to know the community, getting to know you as individual board members and any other important stakeholders, getting to know staff, teachers, students, parents in the community. That's the foundation. That would include a community survey, as well as one-on-one interviews and focus groups. And that all comes together in a report out that informs those key competencies and responsibilities for the role. Secondly, our focus on designing an anti-racist hiring process that mitigates bias. This is core to our work. We are grounded in having those difficult conversations. We want to be able to create the safe space so that we can talk about these topics together with you as a board and challenge one another when difficult issues come up. That is part of our screening process, and all of that is it leads into our performance-based interviews. So scenarios, behavioral-based questions, where people are demonstrating to you the work that they've done that aligns to the competencies that you seek. And then lastly, that strong facilitation of your decision-making. Again, coming back to the competencies, challenging one another when the conversations get difficult, but also inviting everyone to participate and share what they're thinking and feeling. All right. So I want to pause. I'll ask my colleagues if I missed anything that they want to chime in on, and I'll turn it back over to you, Board Chair Hollins.
Thank you so much. I got off the screen. I was in the other room where I could actually see the presentation, so I was able to view it. So thank you for the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to my board colleagues. If you have any follow-up questions, please raise your hand and I can get you called on. We're going to start with Director DePass, and then we'll go to Director Sullivan.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation and appreciate the time difference that you're dealing with on this important interview. I wanted to ask a question about your screening process. You talked about the targeted research and recruitment and the competency-based screening, but are you screening people based on things such as their demonstrated ability to close the achievement gap between our white students and our students of color, which is really great in Portland?
Yes. So we will spend some time, one, with you, designing screening activities that align to your needs. So we'll be asking questions such as, tell me about a time when, or describe how you have done XYZ in your previous experience. And we'll be listening for the evidence of successful outcomes on behalf of students. So that's first and foremost. That is, I think, at some point in student-centered leadership or some instructional alignment to your goals will be a competency, if I had to predict. And that would be one of the first things that we would be screening for.
Director Sullivan, did you have a question?
Actually, it was the same question, just in case Michelle didn't ask it.
Okay. Any other questions? Director Burmel-Witz?
Thanks for the presentation, and like Michelle, appreciate the late hour. I'm a night owl, but I realize not everybody is. This is like my prime hour. And so I'm curious about your, when you're listening to the community and engaging with them, one, how do you go about selecting who to listen to? As we know, the loudest voices aren't always the ones that are zeroing in on what we really need to key in on. So how do you select them? And then how do you go about integrating that into sort of the job description, and how do you pressure test, like, you know, because you're not going to hear everybody, and you're going to hear some voices, some softer voices, and how do you know how you've found really that the ones that are going to key in on those attributes and competencies that we need in order to, like, get after our goals and what we want to do as a board and a district?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we will want to design our site visit around with your input. So we'll start by collecting the names and organizations that are key partners, that are key thought leaders. We'll want to collect a long list of potential people to meet with. We'll also want to have some public opportunities for people to attend, either in person or virtually, depending on your preferences. And then I think we want to leverage some of those other organizations to help spread the word, to come out to these events. Yeah, I'm thinking back to Portland, Maine, where we had the head of the family and community engagement team as kind of a key thought partner in our project design. So that point person really helped bring out the voices of the community, particularly multilingual families in Portland, Maine. Portland, Maine is a refugee city. So it was just amazing. We had these community events and we had, 2 tables of Latinx parents. We had a table of Somali parents. We had a table of French-speaking families. We had a table of who else was represented? It was just beautiful. Part of what brought people out is the family and engagement team provided food. We had halal food, we had Thai food, we had Indian food, there was childcare available. So we want to leverage the resources and the networks that you all have in your community to bring people out to events. And if if virtual works best, we will do as many virtual sessions as possible. If there are partner organizations who draw a great crowd, then we need to leverage those partners, and maybe we have something at a partner organization's location as opposed to a school. So we'll want to thoughtfully design what that community engagement looks like and really invite some of the voices in the community who may not always have a seat at the table, but know how to get people to the table to be a part of that. Anything you would add, Eliana?
I think
or
it's just
Nita?
really about tailoring that approach. It looks different in different communities and with different districts, but really tapping into those networks is really important. So sometimes just even what I've noticed is, we'll start with an initial list of partners, and then those partners create other connections to other pockets of the community. And so that's another channel, and we're really open to continuing to create those spaces, whether they be virtual or in person. So we'll extend and expand that reach depending on what we get. I think that one of the other pieces to integrate into this is really looking at your student demographics. If our community engagement groups aren't really reflective of that, then we've got some work to do to ensure that we're getting the right voices in the space, that we're getting the diversity of the voices that we need to hear from in the space. And that's something that's really important to us. So we're always looking at that. The last piece I'll add is just the integration of student voice into that. Those who have the most at stake are our kids who are in the classrooms every single day. So creating virtual sessions, in-person sessions, where they really have input and voice in that process is something that we really pride ourselves in. And I'll just share as an example of that. In one of our most recent engagements, the number of student participants was actually quite high, both in person and through the survey. And so we created a separate summary just of the feedback we heard from students as a way to test, what did we hear from the general community? What specifically did we hear from students? And then provided that back to our students. It was really greatly appreciated, but also served as another check for us, if you will, as to the competencies and the criteria that we prioritize through that process.
And I will say, just this evening, we had another virtual session with the Lawrence community.
That was this evening.
It was this evening as well.
That was today.
And both Monica and Eliana speak Spanish. And so we have some monolingual Spanish breakout rooms. And Lawrence, Massachusetts is predominantly Latinx. And so many of the parents and students prefer to speak in Spanish, although they speak English. And so we are able to provide monolingual Spanish sessions as well.
That was
Frankie, you have your hand up?
Yes, we have Student Director Frankie.
Hi, thank you all so much for speaking with us. I was wondering, like on average, about how many of those community engagement sessions you host?
So we, our site visit is usually, our in-person site visit is usually 2 to 3 days. We would schedule evening events, but during the day, we are also trying to meet with as many people as possible, almost every hour of the day, up until those community gatherings in the evening. So our days are filled from 8 a.m. to about 9 p.m. with in-person meetings and focus groups with staff, students, parents, community partners, and others. And so we're trying to fit everybody in the 3 days. And then we're also doing virtual sessions before we get on site, either one-on-one interviews and any virtual makeup sessions, so to speak, after we visit. In Lawrence, we were trying to plan around potential inclement weather in Massachusetts. So having virtual options in case the weather didn't permit allowed us to make sure that we were able to meet with as many people as possible. Nita, I don't know if you have the numbers on a similar size district in terms of the number of people we've met in person or the number of sessions we've had in person, as well as the survey data. We do track our survey data relative to the size of the system. And so we do have some targets that we're wanting to hit. So we're going to be working with you to say, hey, these numbers look low. We don't have any representation from this school. Can we reach out to this principal? Can we get the principal in the high school to give time during advisory for the students to complete the survey so that our student participation goes up? We want to we want to make sure that people have a chance to participate. If they don't get to meet us in person, they can also share their feedback via survey.
I do happen to have the survey numbers, and I apologize. My cat, my foster cat here, really wants to be on camera. But roughly, for a district of about 40,000 students, I'd say on average have been getting around 4,200 survey responses. So, and that's about what we try to aim for, is like that about 10-to-1 ratio. And that the number, and we do go back through, because one of the questions we often get asked is like, do you have essentially ballot stuffing? Like, are there folks that will turn in a survey 78 times to try to boost the numbers or swing that way? And we do filter for that as well, just to ensure that that is not happening, because we do allow the same IP address to submit multiple times, because we recognize that there may be folks at a public library or at a school computer or something that a lot of folks, whether it's staff or students, are going through and using in order to complete the survey.
All right. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Okay. All right. We have 9 more minutes. If you guys want to go ahead and do your closing remarks, we would love to hear.
And is there any time for questions that we might have?
Well, it'll be within that 9 minutes. So if you want to ask questions, you can. Absolutely.
I'm curious if you all have thought about the structure for your search, if you've thought about having a separate committee, or if the board is committing to do this work on their own.
That's a discussion we still have to have.
Got it. And are there any internal candidates that you know of? Or do you believe there to be any internal candidates that you're considering?
Director Sullivan?
As far as I know, we don't have an internal candidate, but we have gotten some emails from people saying, hey, I know somebody in the community. So
got it.
that tied up.
There's some interest from the community.
Director to pass.
I would second that there have been some, not just emails, but phone calls as well about people that may be positioned or interested. I haven't followed up with the candidates themselves, but I've heard that there may be internal or local candidates.
Great. And when do you intend to make a decision?
As soon as we get a good candidate.
A good search firm? When do you intend to make a decision on the search firm?
Oh, gotcha. The goal is to have a decision made by next Tuesday.
Well, in closing, we want to thank you for the time to learn more about Alma Advisory Group. I think you will find, if you have a chance to talk to any of our references, that we provide a very customized service. It is targeted. It is hands-on. We are going to be here for you from start to finish. We will work closely with the board or your designees, and we hope your district leadership to ensure a successful and transparent search process. And again, we just thank you for the time, and we hope that we have the opportunity to work with Portland, Oregon.
Yes. So thank you once again for you guys' time and taking the time out at this hour as well. We appreciate your presentation. And like I said, you should be able to hear from us at the latest by probably like Monday, Tuesday morning at the latest, or before. So I just wanted to thank you again for your time. And we hope you guys have a great evening.
All right. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we got through that. We got 5 minutes left. So, sorry, I'm eating these nerds. I sent out what I was going to use, and Kara added into the paper that she sent out to everybody to kind of score. So what I did is the stuff that I broke out was based on the experience, which we get 50 points for, and then the past, the pre-pass work, which is 50%, that can go off of the actual proposal that they sent, because a lot of questions around their past performances were in the questions on that as well. So if you go back and look at their proposals, you can get a lot of that information from their past experiences to make out your 50%, your 50 points for that. They get 50 points for each one to come up to 100. One of the only things that, and you also look at the price, because there's definitely a price difference in the three. And so we want to have to take that into consideration, as you're making your decisions. And I don't know if we can talk about the actual price yet, Liz, or.
I actually don't know, Gary, so let's not. And I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that on the spot.
Okay.
And I just also want to mention, I think Julia jumped off the call.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Yeah, so one of us may want to relay the information to her, whatever we're talking about now.
I want to just mention something, and that's that we only had 2 areas that we were evaluating on, and they were each equally weighted. One was past performance, and then I think was the other one capacity on that score.
Yeah, experience and capacity, yeah.
So we didn't include cost in our evaluation because it wasn't one of the criteria. And so I would like some clarity on, I mean, there was quite a spread.
Yeah, well, it's not in the interview section, but it's in the proposal.
Yeah.
It was in the proposal one, but it was not in the interview one, if I'm correct.
Oh, okay. The scoring rubric that you sent us that had 50% weighted each equally, when was it?
Yeah, that was from my understanding, that was just for the interview section. Am I right, Liz? All right, we have to talk.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what I would recommend is that let me make sure I confer with Emily on the prior advice she has given, and that we send out something first thing in the morning to make sure we're giving consistent advice across this. It's important to get it right. So thank you.
Yeah, just my past experience is if you're evaluating the proposal and the interview, you have a rubric, and then cost is usually part of it. But sometimes you can add in other values-based decision criteria. We only had those two things to evaluate on, so I appreciate some clarity.
Yeah, so why don't we do that before anyone completes their full evaluation? Let's get that to you first thing in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I have an evaluation sheet, by the way, so.
Kara should have sent it out to you. You can maybe check your email or.
Oh, it was in the email earlier.
It's also uploaded in Board Book, and in Board Book, there's a link to your individual sheets. You each have your own.
Okay, great, thanks.
Those individual sheets are just scoring on the questions. So Liz, whatever, it sounded like there was a bigger scoring sheet maybe that I also haven't seen. So Liz, whatever direction we send out tomorrow, if we could just be really clear on what you need from each board member back, because I have the individual sheet with the questions, but I'm not sure I have the other thing it sounds like Gary was referencing.
Yeah, or if I have, there should be, there are two, both in our inboxes, and I believe, Gary, you sent out one a couple days ago.
Yeah, question.
That evaluated on the two, they were each 50 points to add up to 100. And then I think you also sent out the questions with the what to look for, kind of a little bit more detailed.
Yeah, I think the document that was shared with us, or emailed to us, has what the Gary's questions incorporated into it, as well as the scoring. So it's all in one.
So we'll clarify it by email tomorrow. And if you have any other questions after that, be sure you ask. We want to make sure you all have a common understanding and the right form. And I'm sorry that Emily's not here to weigh in. I really need to make sure she and I are aligned on that. And so just give us till first thing in the morning, and then we'll clarify that.
All right, we'll wait for you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm just saying, if y'all not hearing her legal response, she said the same thing like 3 different times. She said it fast one time, she slowed it up. I mean,
coming from an expert orator, Director Green, I'll take that as a compliment.
All right, Director Silverstein, you got your hand up?
So when are our evaluations due?
Well, the goal is to have them due by Friday, but we're going to wait for Liz to give us more direction. But if we can have them done by Friday, Monday at the latest, would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Director DePass?
I was also going to ask about when they were due, and then, gosh, I had another question. Are we going to have an opportunity? We're going to rate them as individuals. Will we have an opportunity to discuss as a group? I think that would be valuable. I think it'd be valuable I'm thinking back to like other processes I've been through, to sort of weigh and discuss rather than just look at the numerical score and there's an obvious winner.
I think the challenge is we'd have to do it at a public meeting like this one was.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen a 7-member elected board go through a process like this, so I'm kind of interested to see how this plays out.
It's all about doing it different these days. It's about doing it different.
Yeah, we can always do something different. So
we're doing it different.
It's up to you guys. You guys want to talk about it on Tuesday? So we have it scheduled, a special session scheduled anyway.
I'm not sure I see much value. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Michelle. I think the traditional process does involve that discussion. we are an elected body and currently meeting in public session that's being broadcast to probably 3 people who are watching. I think it's really challenging. I think it's really challenging to have an open conversation about firms' weaknesses and strengths. Strengths are pretty easy, but I don't really feel comfortable publicly talking about weaknesses that I saw. I think that doesn't, I don't think that reflects well on us as a district if we start going down that road in a public meeting.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think that we want to make sure we follow whatever the ORS, 279 or whatever is. And I don't know for informal contracts what those rules are. So, but sounds like we'll get clarity tomorrow.
Sounds
First thing in the
good.
morning.
All right. Any other questions?
Frankie's hand went up.
And I just jumped off.
Huh?
I was just
We're
saying.
waiting. We're waiting till tomorrow. Liz is going to get back to us to let us know what official document we should be using for scoring and what we can actually score in the rankings. And everything is due by Friday, Monday at the latest. And Frankie's hand is up.
I don't know like any of the rules about this, but like if it wouldn't be in our best interest to like discuss it as a whole group, would it be possible for like us to share our evaluation sheets with each other so we could look over them and see other people's perspectives?
I think that's kind of some of the clarity that we're going to get from Liz tomorrow.
I will address that tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to wait. That's a legal thing.
I like where you're coming from though, Frankie. I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna wait tomorrow to get direction from Liz. And then we'll go from there. If you have any questions, you can either email me or Liz. It'll probably be Liz, because I'm not gonna probably know all the answers either. And then we'll just wait for that, and then we'll figure it out by Friday or Monday. All right, it's 10:34.
Question.
No, it's too late. You're too late for questions. It's too late for questions.
Oh, Julie.
Raise my hand.
Go ahead.
Hey, whatever came about of the question about their fee offer, do we have visibility to that?
So Julia, while you were off, that's one of the questions about fees and how that weighs in or doesn't on the scoring that I need to confer with Emily about based on the prior structure of this procurement. So I'm going to address that along with the other questions first thing in the morning.
Yeah, but the question that we asked did get answered, and that should be in the information we sent out to every board member around the proposal. So when we sent every board member the proposals for these 3 firms. The question we asked about their fee structure, the additional question is in that same proposal. They just added it into it. So everybody should have visibility of the fee structure and the additional question we asked about their fee structure.
I have a comment about that or question, and that's that, are we considering, so on some contracts, public contracts, you have to take the lowest bidder.
Like, this is not a low bid.
This is an informal procurement.
Informal, right. So cost it's important to know because there's a spread, but it's not I'd like
relative.
If are we using cost as a decision-making criteria or not? Like, how important is it?
We're going to wait till tomorrow when Liz comes back with clarity. She said the same thing. And so we're not going to get a different answer from her because this is what lawyers do. I've sat in the room with them enough time. I've tried to finagle the question, and they've spent it the same way, the same words. She's going to get back to us tomorrow with clarity, and we'll be able to go from there. No matter how we spend it, if we talk about money, she's going to say, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow.
All right.
Perfect. Ask her more questions tomorrow, right? We can
Yes. Take all the questions tomorrow you got.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions anyone has? Anybody who haven't spoke, Eddie? You good? Okay. Well,
Julia, are you trying to say something? Say it, Julia.
Y'all, I'm going to bed. All right.
No, we're having
have a good one. Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
You had another question? No more questions? You had a question? Julie, did you have a question?
I did. One of the things we asked, this is just like a process question. We asked people for references. Were we going to call them, or do we care? I don't have a point of view. I'm just wondering if that was part of the process. We did ask for people to give us references.
Also,
Yeah.
Herman and I have a informal, there was a question put out to school board partners about search firms, and 2 of the ones that we interviewed tonight came up and the 3rd did not. The 2 that came up that people weighed in on were Ray and Associates and then Alma Advisors.
I don't think we can talk about that. Look at Liz's face.
Yeah, sorry, it's late. My filters are fading. I really, and I apologize that this was not set out more clearly in advance, and I need to confer with Emily to make sure I know what information you should be relying on or not in this informal procurement. And so I've got the references, the scoring form, contract cost, and I want to make sure we get clear advice, because you have invested a lot of time in these search firms have invested a lot of time in this process, and we want to make sure we get it right. So I regret that I don't have a clear answer for you tonight, but I promise you I'm going to get one first thing in the morning.
And her face tells the whole story.
All right. So thanks everybody for your time and efforts. We'll get more information tomorrow. All right, you guys, have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night, Frankie.